The people call David Pecker.
Witness entering courtroom. Remain standing. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you are going to give before this court and jury shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Do you so swear or affirm?
I do.
Please be seated. Please state your name.
David Pecker.
Spelling your last name.
Pecker.
County of residence.
Barfield, Connecticut.
Good afternoon, Mr. Pecker. You may inquire.
May I inquire?
Yes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Pecker.
Good afternoon.
I'm sorry to start with this question. How old are you?
72.
Are you married?
Yes.
How long have you been married?
36 years.
Can you briefly describe your educational background for the jury?
Yes. I have a bachelor's degree from Pace University, and I also received a doctorate degree that was granted to me from Pace.
I'm going to ask you to slide your chair a little bit forward so your mouth is a little closer to the microphone.
Okay.
That's better. Thank you. Are you currently employed?
I'm self-employed, no.
What are you doing now?
I do consulting work.
And is one of the companies you consult for your prior employer?
Yes, I do.
Who is your prior employer?
My prior employer was American Media.
Is that known as AMT for short?
AMI is correct.
Apologize for interrupting you. We didn't give the jurors an opportunity to get some writing materials. Do any of you want writing materials? Raise your right hand. Keep your hand up. I apologize for interrupting.
No problem.
Does everyone who wants a pad or a pen have one? Okay, great. Sorry, Mr. Steinglass.
No problem. So I think we left off. You were telling us what kind of company AMI is.
American Media is a publishing company that primarily publishes celebrity magazines, and it used to publish health and fitness magazines.
Can you give us some examples of other AMI publications?
Yes, the National Enquirer, the Globe Life and Style, In Touch, Closer, Us Weekly, Star, Ailcent, and on the health and fitness titles, it was Shape and Muscle and Fitness and Flex.
What was your title at AMI?
I was chairman, president, and CRO.
Did you also have an ownership interest?
Yes, I owned 10% of the company.
How long did you work at AMI?
From March 1999 through August of 2020.
During the period from 2015, say, to 2017, what was your title?
The same title, chairman, president, and CEO.
And can you describe a little bit for the jury what your responsibilities were in those titles?
In a publishing environment, you have multiple different departments. On the editorial side, you have editor-in-chief, and you have the staff, managing editors, freelancers, reporters. And on the operations side, you have various different departments, accounting department, finance department, and you have a legal department, human resources administration. All those departments reported to the directors of each of those units that I just mentioned, and that is the leadership team. And all those people reported directly to me.
So as CEO and president and chairman, did you have the final say over publishing decisions, including which stories would get published and which stories would not get published?
Yes, I had the final say. On the celebrity side of the magazine industry, at least on the tabloid side, we used checkbook journalism and we pay for stories. So I gave a number to the editors that they could not spend more than $10,000 to investigate or produce or publish a story. So anything over $10,000 that they would spend on a story, that would have to be vetted and brought up to me if they were going to spend more for approval.
In addition to having to approve expenditures, did you also have final kind of editorial say? In other words, the ability to determine that a particular story was not going to be run or a particular story was going to be run?
Being in the publishing industry for 40 years, I realized early in my career that the only thing that was important is the cover of a magazine. So when the editors produce a story or prepare the cover, we would have a meeting and they would present to me what the story would be, what the concept was, what the cost was going to be.
And if the story involved, I guess for lack of a better way to say it, a big story or a famous person, did you have the final say on whether or not to publish that story?
Yes, I did.
Where generally was your office located?
We were located in Boca Raton, Florida, and in Manhattan I have been out a little bit for a while on the corner of Broad and Water Street.
Okay. Are you familiar with the term editor meetings?
Yes, I am.
Can you explain to the jury what is an editor meeting? What are editor meetings?
As the editors prepare and put a story together, and spending these expenditures to produce that, and then coming up to producing a cover, I would have a meeting for the editors to present their covers to me, and then I would take a look and see if the cover that's being presented meets some qualifications. As an example, we have a large research department, and if the cover subject was going to be presented, I personally wanted to make sure that the cover subject is not in the sole interest of the editor, that it was interested in who our audience is. We would have a lot of conversations with respect to why did they pick that subject, Is the topic over right now? What the cover line is going to be? What the photo is? And then that's how. So we would have these meetings before the publication was finalized, and then we would have these meetings sometimes once or twice a week.
And did you participate in editor meetings?
Yes, I participated in all of them.
Were there editor meetings for all of AMI's publications or on certain publications?
Primarily the celebrity titles, the tabloids.
How about the National Enquirer?
Yes, for the National Enquirer, yes.
Was that AMI's most well-known tabby, to use your word?
Yes.
During the period from 2015 to 2017, what were the last 4 digits of your work cell phone number?
7,501. Is it 01 or 917,705? 7,591.
You gave us more than that. All right. And your personal cell phone, just the last 4 digits?
5,955.
How about the last 4 digits of your last phone number in New York City?
4,899.
And did you have a separate office phone number in Florida?
Yes, I did.
You don't happen to remember the last 4 digits of that number?
Yes, I do now. 1221, okay.
This isn't a quiz. During the same period, did you have an AMI email address?
Yes, I did.
How many email addresses?
I had 2 email addresses.
And without giving us the beginning portion of those email addresses, did they end with the domain name amalink.com?
Yes, they did.
Now, why did you have 2 separate email addresses at amilink.com?
Well, the reason being, I would receive hundreds of emails a day, and I had my assistants look at all of my emails to vet out which ones I should look at right away, which ones were important or not. I also had a second email address which was private, because I would receive emails from the Human Resources Department on salaries and raises and compensation, or sometimes other sensitive issues which I didn't want my assistants to see. So I had 2.
So without giving us the exact name of those email addresses, is it fair to say you had one kind for general purposes and one for purposes that you didn't want other people to have access to?
That's correct.
And in addition to HR matters like salary, did you also sometimes use the more restrictive email address when you were dealing with sensitive subjects or sources?
Yes, for confidential I would.
Are you here today pursuant to a subpoena?
Yes, I am.
And are you represented by counsel?
Yes, I am.
Is your lawyer present in court?
Yes, he is.
Are you familiar with somebody named Dylan Howard?
Yes, I am.
Who is Dylan Howard?
Dylan Howard was a reporter, a celebrity reporter for American Medi. He was also promoted over the years to become editor-in-chief of the National Enquirer, editor of Star. He was the managing director of Radar, a digital celebrity site, and he was also the chief content officer of the company.
So, which means, to clarify, that means that all the editors reported directly to Dylan Howard. So he was kind of like Chief Editor-in-Chief?
That's correct.
But in addition to that, he was also the editor-in-chief of the National Enquirer?
Yes, he was.
And was that true during the periods from 2015 to 2017?
Yes, that's correct.
In that capacity, who was his direct supervisor?
Dylan reported directly to me.
And can you describe for the jury a little bit about what Dylan Howard's roles were in each of those 2 jobs? Now, you said he had a lot of jobs, but the 2 that I'm asking about in particular being editor-in-chief of the National Enquirer and kind of being the editor-in-chief of all the AMI publications, the chief content officer?
The difference about celebrity magazines versus other magazines, these celebrity or tabloids are all weekly, so they're all weeklies. The editor, as Dylan would receive, as I call it, his report card every week based on what the sales would be. So you would know immediately whatever decision Dylan made or we made for the cover of the magazine, you would immediately see what sales were. If it was a mistake, you didn't do it again. That's one. The other piece, the other portion of the job is all of the sources, freelancers, editors, photographers, writers, all reported up to different department heads, but they all ended up reporting to Dylan.
As chief content officer?
As chief content officer.
Now, tilde withdrawn. So is it fair to say that Dylan Howard kind of ran the network of sources for AMI, all of AMI's publications?
Yes, because his job was to make sure that we would have the most exclusive and current content.
Now, when it came to, I don't know how to say this, juicy stories, did he run those decisions by you?
Yes, he did.
Was part of his responsibilities to maintain relationships and cultivate relationships with potential sources?
Yes, it was a very important part of his job.
And forgive me for asking this question. I know it's a little bit basic. Can you explain what is a source?
Yes. As an editor of a tabloid magazine, you develop over the years a group of sources, and the sources might be people who work in hotels, people who work for lawyers, people who work for various different aspects of a celebrity. A celebrity might be using, like, for example, a limousine service. We develop sources, and that's really what makes a celebrity reporter or celebrity editor or celebrity editor-in-chief. It's important how valid their sources are. and they build this entire source network.
Thank you. Does Dylan Howard still work at AMI, to your knowledge?
It's my understanding he doesn't work for them any.
Are you still in touch with him personally?
No, I'm not.
Do you know where he is living now?
It's my understanding he is living in Australia.
Are you aware of any health conditions involving Mr. Howard?
Yes?
Objection.
Overruled.
I don't want to get too personal. Can you tell us a little bit about what health conditions involving Mr. Howard you are aware of?
From what I heard, is that he right now has a spinal condition.
And are you aware of whether it's possible for him to travel internationally?
It's my understanding he can't.
During your time working at AMI, were you familiar with someone named Bonnie Fuller?
Yes, I was.
And who was Bonnie Fuller?
Bonnie Fuller's history, she is a very famous editor, and she was hired by Jan Wenner when he purchased Us Weekly. Bonnie Fuller was a celebrity editor, and Jan Wenner hired her, and she turned the magazine around, and it became the most popular magazine in the country. And rather, American media was just in the process of competing against Bonnie Fuller and Us Weekly with my magazines, which was the National Enquirer and Star, and she was basically killing it. So I decided that to see if I could hire Bonnie Fuller, and I approached her, and I was able to bring her over from Wenner Media to become the chief editor of the Star.
Can we stop at this point?
Okay.
Witness entering. The witness, David Pecker, enters the courtroom and resumed the witness stand. Step this way, sir. Step to the officer.
Okay.
Welcome back, Mr. Pecker. I remind you, sir, that you are still under oath.
Yes.
You can get the jury, please.
All rise. Jury entering. Jury enters.
Please be seated.
The jury is present and properly seated.
Good morning, jurors. Welcome back. Jurors, before we continue with the testimony of Mr. Pecker, I just wanted to clarify our schedule for next week. I misspoke yesterday regarding Monday and Tuesday of next week. Next Monday, we are not meeting at all. There will be no work. Tuesday, we will be working all day, all right.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Pecker.
Good morning.
When we broke yesterday, we were talking about Bonnie Fuller. And let me just ask you very briefly, during the period from 2015 to 2017, what was her title?
Executive editor of Star Magazine.
Are you also familiar with someone named Trish McAndrews?
The name is familiar, but I don't recall.
How about just Trish?
Trish, yes. Trish was my assistant.
You don't remember your assistant's last name, Mr. Pecker? That's not going to go over very well.
Well, I always called her Trish for a number of years. Very rarely saw her last name.
Okay, so during the period from 2015 to 2017, was she your assistant?
Yes.
Okay, are you personally familiar with Donald J. Trump?
Yes.
For how long have you known him?
Since the late 80s.
Do you see him today in the courtroom?
Yes, I do.
Would you please point him out, and would you please tell us something that he's wearing?
Oh, he's sitting here. He is wearing, I think it's a dark blue suit.
Indicating Mr. Trump.
Thank you, Judge. How did you meet the defendant?
I met Mr. Trump at Mar-a-Lago. A client of mine, Ronald Perlman, introduced me to a fellow by the name of Nick Ribb. This is all at Mar-a-Lago. And Nick invited me to Mar-a-Lago, and he introduced me to Mr. Trump. And Nick was at that time, if I recollect, he was the president of Resorts Casinos, one of Mr. Trump's hotels and casinos.
And do you remember about when that was?
I think I would say that would be in the 80s, 8 or 89.
Can you describe your relationship with Mr. Trump over the years for the jury?
Yes. I have had a great relationship with Mr. Trump over the years, starting in 89, I had an idea of creating a magazine called Trump Style, and I presented it to Mr. Trump. And he liked the idea a lot, and just questioned me who was going to pay for it, because magazines are pretty expensive. So I told him, I said, Mr. Trump, you have all of these hotels, all of these casinos, all of these apartments. You basically have a fixed distribution. So he liked the idea, and we went ahead and launched the magazine on a quarterly basis. And I would see Mr. Trump probably once a quarter at that time to get the cover approved and the content approved.
So you did in fact launch Trump Style magazine?
Yes.
Did your relationship with Mr. Trump change at all after you acquired the National Enquirer? Yes.
Well, I should say that over the years, from 89 to when I acquired the National Enquirer in March of 99, over those 10 years I was responsible for, I was the president of a French publishing company. And I had a lot of dealings and discussions with Mr. Trump because, as a celebrity in his own right at that time, he was very helpful in introducing me to other executives and other people in New York. And he would always advise me of parties or events or things that I would either go to or send, at that time my editors to, that was prior to the National Enquirer. And then when I bought the National Enquirer in March of 1999, one of the first calls that I received was from Mr. Trump. He called me and he says, "Congratulations," he says, "you bought a great magazine." and he knew over the years the editor-in-chief and a few of the editors at the National Enquirer.
Now, are you familiar with the show The Apprentice?
Yes.
Can you very briefly describe that for the jury?
Mr. Trump and Mark Burnett launched The Apprentice show on NBC. It was an instant success. And this was in 2000, I had a number of conversations with Mr. Trump about The Apprentice, what the ratings were, and how it was doing. And he was always kind enough to send me the content, show the ratings, and I was able to publish that in the National Enquirer and some of the other magazines, and I received all that content. Obviously, I didn't have to pay for it. And it was a great mutual beneficial relationship because all of the press about the show and how it was doing was all published also along that time. Then in 2003 or 2004, when Mr. Trump launched The Celebrity Apprentice, then our relationship even started to grow even further because the celebrities that he was firing on the show and the amount of press that the show received and the incredible ratings that it had and what I believed it did for Mr. Trump as a national figure on TV, as the boss did a tremendous also help for my magazines. Because they, the audience of the National Enquirer and the other celebrity magazines, loved Mr. Trump as a major celebrity and followed him religiously, I should say. Then I would add on that a lot of content on the show, whether somebody was going to be fired or terminated or there was some controversy he would have. As the publisher, Mr. Trump was kind enough to give me the information first, so it was very beneficial for my magazines. And that ran from 2004 to 2014.
And just to put that in a little bit of context, I'm not sure you said this, but did The Apprentice show involve several contestants that were competing to be hired by Mr. Trump?
Yes.
But even though they hadn't been hired, as people were eliminated as the show went on, he would say, "You are fired," and they would basically be eliminated from the show. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, did there come a point during the relationship and the way it evolved that you just described that you came to consider Mr. Trump a friend?
Yes, I did.
And during the period from 2015 to 2017, did you consider Mr. Trump a friend?
Yes, I did.
When you spoke with Mr. Trump, what did you call him?
I would call him Donald.
Prior to 2015, how often would you say you spoke to Trump?
Maybe monthly or quarterly I would speak to Mr. Trump. Or if there was an event that came up, if he fired somebody on The Celebrity Apprentice and it was something that was going to get a lot of national news, I would speak to him more often.
And how often would you see him during the period from, say, 2015 to 2017? How often would you see him in person?
Oh, I would say I would see him maybe either once a month or once or twice a quarter.
Okay, and did that change at some point in 2015?
Yes. After Mr. Trump announced his run for president, I saw Mr. Trump more frequently, maybe once a month.
Did you also communicate with Mr. Trump by telephone?
Yes.
And how often did you do that?
Maybe once every couple of weeks.
When you spoke to him, did you speak to him? Did you call him on a cell phone, a landline, or something else?
I would call his office, and I would speak to his assistant, who would transfer me to Mr. Trump. Or if he called me, he would call me in my office.
And did you ever speak to him on your cell phone?
Yes, but very infrequently.
Did you ever speak to him on his cell phone?
I did, but also very infrequently.
So mostly it was reach each other through your offices?
That's correct.
Now, you said that sometimes when you would call the office and you would speak to his assistant, can you give her a name?
Yes, Rona Graffs.
And is that his Stant at the Trump Organization?
Yes, at the Trump Organization, Mr. Trump's assistant.
Did you ever communicate with Mr. Trump through his bodyguard?
Yes, I have.
Do you remember his bodyguard's name?
Keith Schiller.
And was that something that you did frequently or infrequently?
Infrequently.
Did Mr. Trump ever call you from Mr. Schiller's phone?
I believe I spoke to him on Mr. Schiller's phone maybe one time.
Okay, and were there instances where Mr. Schiller would pass messages on to you from Mr. Trump?
Yes, but also infrequently.
Okay, did you have occasion over the years to observe Mr. Trump's business practices?
Yes.
In what context?
I had a meeting with Mr. Trump in his office, and when I was there, his assistant Rona brought in a batch of invoices and checks to sign. And I observed Mr. Trump, he asked me, while he was reviewing the accounts payable packages. We were talking at the same time, and I noticed that he reviewed the invoice and looked at the check, and then he was signing them.
So on the occasion that the occasions that you noticed that, could you tell whether the check was stapled to the invoice or just somehow attached to it?
As I recollect, the entire package was stapled together.
And so you observed him reviewing what looked like an invoice and signing what looked like a check?
That is correct.
How would you describe withdrawn? Did you visit Mr. Trump at Trump Tower on multiple occasions?
Over the years.
Over the years?
Yes.
How would you describe him as a businessman?
I would describe Mr. Trump as very knowledgeable. I would describe him as very detail-oriented. I would describe him as almost as a micromanager from what I saw, that he looked at all of the aspects of whatever the issue was.
How about his approach to money?
I thought that his approach to money, he was very cautious and very frugal.
Are you familiar with someone named Michael Cohen?
Yes, I am.
Who is Michael Cohen?
Michael Cohen was Donald Trump's personal attorney.
Do you remember when and where you met Michael Cohen?
I met Michael Cohen at a bar mitzvah in early 2000.
And how did you meet him?
Oh, one of the vendors of our company invited me and my wife to his son's bar mitzvah, and this fellow, he introduced me to Michael Cohen.
Did there ever come a time when Mr. Trump also introduced you to Michael Cohen?
Yes, I was in Mr. Trump's office and he introduced me to Michael Cohen. It was in 2007. And what he said to me was, he said that he hired Michael Cohen. He lives in one of his condominiums, that he has done a lot of great things for him, and all of the contacts that I had with Mr. Trump, that now my contacts should go through Michael Cohen, and anything that I came up and told Mr. Trump about, if there were any rumors in the marketplace about Mr. Trump or his family, or any negative stories that were coming out, or anything that I heard overall that I would go through, I would call Michael Cohen directly.
And that was back in 2007?
Yes.
So was that before or after the bar mitzvah where you had first met Michael Cohen?
Oh, 7 years after.
Okay. So you had met him once before, but now Mr. Trump kind of told you he had hired him and told you about hiring him?
Yes. I was surprised that I knew him before.
During the period, withdrawn, were you aware of what Michael Cohen's title was vis-a-vis Mr. Trump?
I knew when Mr. Trump introduced Michael Cohen to me that it was his personal lawyer. That was the only title that I knew.
Okay. So during the period from 2015 to 2017, I'm obviously going to keep coming back to that period. Was Michael Cohen still in that role as a personal attorney to Mr. Trump?
Yes.
During that period, again, from 2015 to 2017, how frequently would you meet with Michael Cohen?
I would speak to Michael Cohen probably if I had something to call him about, or I heard something, I had something to discuss, probably maybe once a month, twice a quarter. And then if there was an issue or something that he wanted to follow up on, or I advised him of something and we were working on it, I would speak to him more frequently.
After, I think you mentioned earlier that at some point in we will come back to this later, that at some point in 2015 you told us that Mr. Trump announced his candidacy for president?
That's correct.
Did the frequency of contact that you had with Michael Cohen increase, decrease, or stay the same after Mr. Trump announced his candidacy?
Increased.
So after that presidential announcement, how often would you say that you had contact with Michael Cohen?
I would say a minimum of every week, and if there was an issue, it could be daily.
Do you know somebody named Hope Hicks?
Yes, I do.
Who is Hope Hicks?
Hope Hicks was the communication director for Mr. Trump. I knew Hope Hicks also when she worked for Ivanka, for her beauty, first for her fashion business, and then Hope Hicks worked for the communication company that I had at American Media the company was called Hiltzik Strategies, and Hope worked for them and his name was Matthew Hiltzik, and Hope was assigned to work for Star Magazine.
Now, did there come a point after Mr. Trump announced his candidacy that Hope Hicks became the communications director of the campaign?
Yes.
Now, you mentioned in your previous answer the name Ivanka. For the record, are you referring to Ivanka Trump?
I am, yes. Ivanka Trump, Mr. Trump's daughter, correct.
Thank you. I am just making the record clear.
Yes.
So, directing your attention to early 2015, did you ever speak with the defendant about his interest in running for president?
Yes, I did.
And can you tell the jury a little bit about that?
Yes. As I mentioned a little earlier, when Mr. Trump launched The Apprentice and then launched The Celebrity Apprentice, I would say the interest in Mr. Trump through my magazines, basically the National Enquirer, skyrocketed. We would do a lot of research to determine what would the proper cover of the magazine to be, to see which celebrity would sell the best. And in all of the time that every time we did this, Mr. Trump would be the top celebrity. So, and some of the other pieces of the research was clear that Mr. Trump was viewed as the boss, seeing him in the boardroom, seeing him on each of the shows every week. He was the person. So I discussed with him that we did a poll in the National Enquirer about Mr. Trump running for president. How would the readership feel? And I should say the research showed that 80% of the readership of the National Enquirer would want Mr. Trump to run for president. And I passed the information on to Donald Trump, and shortly after he was being interviewed on the Today Show, and Matt Lauer interviewed him with respect to his aspirations of running for president, and one of the comments that Mr. Trump made was that this poll that was just recently done at the National Enquirer.
So he cited your poll to Matt Lauer as he was flirting with the idea of running for president?
Yes.
Do you remember when Mr. Trump announced that he was running for president?
It was June of 2015.
And how do you remember that?
I was there at the announcement.
How did it come to be that you were there at the announcement?
I received an invitation from Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen sent me an invitation saying that there is going to be an announcement, and I believe you should be there. That's how I knew. So that's why.
Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk, I would like to display just for the witness, the parties, and the court at this time the next exhibit, or the first exhibit, which is People's 151. Bear with us while we work out this technology. Mr. Pecker, do you see anything on your screen? Yes, I do. Okay. Do you recognize this exhibit, People's 151?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
It's an email from me to Michael Cohen dated June 2nd, 2015, thanking him for thinking of me for his invitation. And then there is an invitation from Michael Cohen to me, which is the first email inviting me to the June 16th press announcement at Trump Tower at 11 o'clock.
So that's the email that you were referring to?
Yes.
I will offer this into evidence.
No objection.
People's 151 is accepted into evidence.
Marked in evidence.
Okay. Now please display this for everyone. Thank you very much. Okay, it's a little small, so I think we can blow up portions of it as we need it. Can you just tell us when you got the email?
June 2nd. June 2nd, 2015 at 6:59 a.m.
Okay, and what was the substance of the email? You can just read it to us?
Oh, okay. I hope you are well. I'm sure you have seen the news about the June 16th press announcement at Trump Tower at 11 a.m. As a friend, I would love if you could make it. Let me know so I can save you a seat next to me on the atrium floor. No one deserves to be there more than you.
And how was the email signed?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
I asked you how was the email signed, from whom, who signed it?
Oh, from Michael Cohen.
Got it, thank you. Did you go?
Yes, I went.
Tell us about it.
I was there. I walked into Trump Tower. Michael Cohen was in the atrium, so I found him. Then I was there when Mr. Trump and Melania came down the staircase and went up to the podium.
And is that when he announced his candidacy for president?
Yes.
Now again, you used the name Melania in your answer. Are you referring to Melania Trump?
Melania Trump, yes.
And is that the defendant's wife?
Yes.
And directing your attention to a couple of months later, now in August 2015, did there come a time when you attended a meeting in Trump Tower?
Yes.
Do you remember when roughly that meeting was in the middle of August? And who was present for that meeting?
Donald Trump, Michael Cohen, and Hope Hicks.
And was Hope Hicks there the whole she was in and out?
She was in and out.
How about Michael Cohen and Donald Trump? Were they there for the duration of the meeting?
Yes.
How did the meeting come about? How did you know to go?
I received a call from Michael Cohen telling me that the boss wanted to see me, and that's how, when I spoke to Michael Cohen, that's how he would refer to Donald Trump as the boss.
What did you understand the purpose of the meeting to be before you actually got there?
Most of the time when I received a call from Michael Cohen, he wanted something, so I assumed that they were going to ask. I was going to be asked for something. I didn't know what it was before I got there.
Well, can you describe for the jury what happened at that meeting, please?
At that meeting, Donald Trump and Michael, they asked me what can I do and what my magazines could do to help the campaign. So thinking about it, as I did previously, I said what I would do is I would run or publish positive stories about Mr. Trump, and I would publish negative stories about his opponents. And I said that I would also be the eyes and ears of I said I would be your eyes and ears, because I know that the Trump organization had a very small staff. And then I said that anything that I hear in the marketplace, if I hear anything negative about yourself, or if I hear anything about women selling stories, I would notify Michael Cohen. As I did over the last several years, I would notify Michael Cohen. And then he would be able to have them kill in another magazine, or have them not be published, or somebody would have to purchase them.
Purchase the negative stories about Mr. Trump so that they would not get published, you mean?
That they would not get published, yes.
So I want to break that down a little bit. First of all, when you offered withdrawn, so you offered to publish positive stories about Mr. Trump?
Yes.
To publish negative stories about his opponents?
Yes.
And to alert him through Michael Cohen when you came across damaging information, particularly regarding women?
Yes.
And the idea was that so Mr. Trump and Mr. Cohen could prevent that information from being publicized?
Yes.
So you mentioned women in particular. What made you... Are you the one who raised that? Did somebody else raise that? Can you explain to the jury how the topic of women in particular came up?
Well, in a presidential campaign, I was the person that thought that there would be a number. A lot of women come out to try to sell their stories, because Mr. Trump was well known as the most eligible bachelor and dated the most beautiful women. And it was clear that based on my past experience, that when someone is running for a public office like this, it is very common for these women to call up a magazine like the National Enquirer to try to sell their stories. Or I would hear it in the marketplace through other sources that stories are being marketed.
Did you have or express any ideas about how you may be able to help kind of deal with those stories by women?
All I said was I would notify Michael Cohen.
What about Bill and Hillary Clinton? Did their names up during this meeting?
Yes.
Can you explain how?
As I mentioned earlier, my having the National Enquirer, which is a weekly magazine, and you focus on the cover of the magazine and who and what is the story that is the topic of the week. The Hillary running for president and Bill Clinton's womanizing was one of the biggest sales I had for the National Enquirer and the other tabloids. That's the other things that the readers wanted to read about, and that's what I would sell weekly. So I was running the Hillary Clinton stories. I was running Hillary as an enabler for Bill Clinton with respect to all of the womanizing. And it was easy for me to say that I'm going to continue running those type of stories for the National Enquirer.
And did you believe that that would help Mr. Trump's campaign?
I think it was a mutual benefit. Would help his campaign. It would also help me.
Okay, I'm going to come back to that and ask you to elaborate a little bit more.
Okay.
But specifically for the coverage of Hillary Clinton as an enabler of Bill Clinton's womanizing, that was your focus.
Yes, that's what I said.
How, if at all, did Mr. Trump react to your suggestion that you would continue to do that?
He was pleased.
Did you discuss it at any greater length?
As I recollect, he was pleased. Michael Cohen was pleased on the way I was going to handle these issues. And that was the basis of the conversation.
Okay, so now you started to allude to earlier that to some extent this arrangement that you came to at this Trump Tower meeting was mutually beneficial.
Yes, that's correct.
Can you explain to the jury what you mean by that?
When I'm saying mutually beneficial, is in writing positive stories about Mr. Trump and covering the election and writing negative stories about his opponents is only going to increase the newsstand sales of the National Enquirer and the other tabloids. So for me, that was my benefit. And then in doing what? In publishing these type of stories was also going to benefit his campaign. So that's where I was saying that we were both parties were benefiting from it.
And so by each of the things that you agreed to do, did you believe you were doing, both helping Mr. Trump's campaign and also helping sell some magazines?
Yes, I needed the help.
So the portion of the agreement that involved notifying Michael Cohen about negative stories, either from women or some other kind of negative story, what was the ultimate objective of that component of the arrangement that you made at Trump Tower?
Can you rephrase that question?
Yes, it wasn't a good question. I will try again. You said that part of the arrangement was that you would notify Trump through Michael Cohen if you came upon negative stories, whether they involved women or just other negative stories.
Yes.
And what was the purpose of notifying Michael Cohen when you came upon stories like that?
Well, as I did in the past, that would be in the past 8 years. When I notified Michael Cohen of a story that was a negative story, he would try to vet it himself to see if the story was true or not. He would go to the individual publication to get the story to make sure the story wasn't published and getting killed.
Prior to that August 2015 meeting, had you ever purchased a story to not print it about Mr. Trump?
No.
Now, that part of the deal where you were going to notify them so they could buy up negative information about Mr. Trump, did that part help the National Enquirer at all? How was that going to boost sales of the National Enquirer?
No, that didn't help. That is the mutual benefit portion of it.
Except that part doesn't have a mutual benefit. The purpose of that component was to benefit the campaign. Am I understanding you right?
That is right.
But the part about running the positive stories, that was mutually beneficial?
Yes, the part about running the tabloid stories on the opponents, that was mutually beneficial.
Were any of the agreements, the agreement to print the negative stories about the opponents, positive stories from Trump, or the agreement to notify Michael Cohen about potentially negative stories about Donald Trump, were any of those agreements put into writing?
No, they weren't put into writing. It was just an agreement among friends.
Roughly how long would you say this meeting lasted?
20 to 25 minutes.
Did you discuss this meeting with anyone afterwards?
Yes. When I went back to my office, as a matter of fact, I went immediately back to my office and I met with Dylan Howard. I mentioned his name yesterday. He was the chief content officer of the company and the editor-in-chief of the National Enquirer. I described to him the meeting I just had with Mr. Trump and Michael Cohen, and I described to him that this concept and agreement that I made has to be highly, highly confidential. So what I asked him to do was, I asked him to notify the West Coast bureau chief of the National Enquirer. His name was Jerry George, and I asked him to notify the East Coast bureau chief of the National Enquirer. His name is Barry Levine, and I said that any stories that are out there that are commenting about Donald Trump, commenting about his family, commenting about the election, whatever it might be, I want you to vet the stories. I want you to bring them to me. And then I said, We'll have to speak to Michael Cohen. You will call Michael Cohen, or I will call him, and we'll tell him what the stories are. But I want to make sure we vet them first.
Did you tell him why you asked him to keep this arrangement secret?
Yes, I did.
What did you tell him? A. I told him that we were going to try to help the campaign, and to do that, I want to keep this as quiet as possible.
Because if it came out that you were helping the campaign, it would kind of undermine the whole point.
Objection.
Sustained.
So let me rephrase that. Why was it important to you that the arrangement be kept secret?
We have several hundred people that work within the company, and being a tabloid company, the leaks are probably more prevalent within the organization than outside the organization. And I did not want anyone else to know about this agreement I had and what I wanted to do, so that's why I wanted it very confidential.
So did you follow through? Did you publish a series of pro-Trump articles in the National Enquirer?
Yes.
I'm going to show you, and only you, well, the attorneys, People's 152. Tell me when you see that pop up on your screen. Do you see it?
Not yet, no. Yes, I have it in front of me.
Do you recognize this document, 152?
Yes.
What is it?
These are articles and covers from the National Enquirer.
Is it a document containing several headlines?
Yes.
For stories about then-candidate Donald Trump that were published in the National Enquirer between the August 2015 meeting and around the time of the presidential election in 2016?
Yes, that's correct.
Do the headlines correspond to actual stories run in the National Enquirer during that time period?
Yes, they are.
And are the dates on the headlines accurate?
Yes.
And just to be clear, the exhibit is a collection of headlines, not the story itself?
Yes.
I offer them into evidence.
We have no objection. We would ask for a limiting instruction.
Jurors, the court is accepting People's 152 into evidence. The exhibit is being admitted for the limited purpose of demonstrating that the articles were published and the headlines were published and the dates they were published. Also, to put them into context, to put the presentation in context. The exhibit is not in evidence for any other purpose.
Thank you.
Whereupon People's Exhibit 152 was received into evidence.
Okay, now may we please display that to everyone.
Whereupon an exhibit is shown on screen.
People's 152, this is a series of headlines praising our Trump? That was a question.
Pardon me.
That's okay. The question was, are these a series of articles, headlines praising Mr. Trump?
Yes, I was just reading them.
Did each of these headlines correspond to stories that you ran in the National Enquirer?
Yes.
And running these stories in the National Enquirer, was that in fulfillment of the arrangement that you struck, or part of the arrangement that you struck at the Trump Tower meeting in August 2015?
Yes, right.
You also mentioned that another component of that arrangement with Donald Trump and Michael Cohen involved publishing negative stories about Trump's opponents. Is that fair to say?
That's correct.
If we can go back to just showing the witness and the attorneys in the court, I'm going to show you People's 153A, B, and C. Do you see those?
Yes.
By the way, Mr. Pecker, have you had a chance to review each of these exhibits prior to today? You are not seeing them for the first time?
Yes, I did.
What are these exhibits, 153A, B, and C, in most general terms?
These are negative articles and cover headlines or images that we published on Mr. Trump's opponents. I would like to say one other thing if I can.
Sure.
My conversations with Michael Cohen would call me and he would say, we would like for you to run a negative article on, let's say for argument's sake, on Ted Cruz. Then he would send me, he being Michael Cohen, would send me information about Ted Cruz, or about Ben Carson, or about Marco Rubio. That was the basis of our story, and then we would embellish it from there.
We, meaning?
The National Enquirer. The National Enquirer. I would speak to Dylan. He would hear the story. They would start putting together the pieces of it, the photos, what makes sense, how we would try to do it, how the editorial would be executed. It was a process we were trying to explain, not just coming up with the headline.
Thank you for clarifying that. Let me ask you, as part of your answer just now, you said that Michael Cohen would call you periodically and say, we would like you to run a negative story about this political opponent or that political opponent. Is that correct?
Yes.
Who did you understand we to be referring to?
Michael Cohen always told me he was not part of the campaign, so I only assumed that he was talking to Mr. Trump.
To or about?
When I say we.
Right.
Michael Cohen wasn't part of the campaign. When he said we, I thought he was talking about himself and Mr. Trump.
Now, what did you understand Michael Cohen's relationship to the campaign to be?
He always told me he was not part of the campaign.
He did not work for the campaign?
He told me he wasn't part of the campaign. He didn't work for the campaign. He was on the outside. He kept on saying he was Mr. Trump's personal attorney and that he is a lawyer, and he didn't have any issues. He said there was no issues with him with the campaign.
And what did you understand, if anything, his relationship to the campaign to be, I don't mean formal? Let me put it this way. Did you understand there to be an informal relationship between Mr. Cohen and the campaign?
Objection.
Sustained.
What did you understand the relationship to be between Mr. Cohen and the campaign?
Objection.
Overruled. You can answer.
What did you understand the relationship between Eichel Cohen and the campaign to be?
I thought that, I'm going to say it the best way I can. Michael was physically there in every aspect of whatever the campaign was working on, at least at the Trump Organization, at the Trump Tower. He was physically there where the offices were. I thought probably he would have heard things. He wasn't part of the campaign, but I think he may have heard things informally, or he injected himself into it. He said it was informal. That's what I thought, because he said he wasn't part of the campaign.
When you say he injected himself into it, what do you mean?
If there were issues, for example, let's go back to Ted Cruz as an example. So he is physically in that environment, and if he heard, I don't know if he heard it from Mr. Trump or if he heard it from another person within the campaign or someone else, that there are issues about Ted Cruz, and we want this negative article to be written, I would only work with Michael, so I don't know who else he spoke to. That's what I was trying to say.
Okay. When you use the phrase inject himself into it, is it the campaign?
Yes.
So back to Exhibits 153 A, B, and C. My question is, do these documents contain different headlines for stories about various opponents that Trump was facing in the various primaries that were published in the National Enquirer in the months following your August 2015 meeting with Mr. Trump and Michael Cohen?
That's correct.
And do the headlines correspond to actual stories run in the National Enquirer during that time period?
Yes.
And are the dates contained under each of those headlines accurate?
Yes, they are.
I offer them into evidence.
No objection, subject to the same limiting instruction.
People's Exhibits 153A, B, and C are accepted into evidence with the same caveat. At this time, they're being admitted for the limited purpose of demonstrating that the article was published on or about a certain date, and to provide context for the other exhibit. The exhibit is not in evidence for the truth of the matters asserted.
Okay. I would like to now show everyone People's 153. To which candidate does 153A pertain?
Dr. Ben Carson.
Were these articles published towards the end of 2015?
Yes.
Had Ben Carson been gaining popularity in the polls at that time?
Yes, he had.
And were these headlines run in accordance with your agreement that you had struck at Trump Tower in August of 2015 with Mr. Trump and Michael Cohen?
Yes.
I'm going to show you 153B and ask you, to whom does this series of headlines pertain?
Ted Cruz.
I'm going to show you a few in par. I'm displaying the first exhibit on page 1. Does the headline say Ted Cruz shamed by porn star?
That's correct.
And did you run an article with that headline in the National Enquirer?
Yes.
Is there any story behind that one?
I would like to clarify, just so it's clear, that when we were preparing an article, let's say for Ted Cruz, we communicated what we were doing and the direction of the article with Michael Cohen. We would also send him the PDFs of the stories before it was published, so he could see what direction they were going, that we were moving to, and he would comment on them. So we would add content based on the information, some of the information that Michael Cohen had.
Did he ever tell you whether he had shared these headlines with the boss prior to their publication?
I don't recollect that, no.
Now, did any, withdrawn, did there come a time when candidate Trump, then candidate Trump, introduced you to Stephen Bannon?
Yes?
I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. I want to show you one or more of these headlines. Can we show them to the jury and the witness? Thank you. Scroll down to page 3, first headline. Do you remember anything about the history of this article, in particular this headline that states, Ted Cruz sex scandal, 5 secret mistresses?
I don't remember the details of it, but I remember the article.
Do you remember discussing it with Michael Cohen to its publication?
We would have discussed it, yes.
I'm going to show you one more from this exhibit, which is 153B, page 5, top headline, Donald Trump blasts Ted Cruz's dad for photo with JFK assassin. Do you remember anything about the history behind this article?
Yes. Dylan Howard had the research department take a look at Ted Cruz's father's photos, and we matched the photos in every different picture with that of Lee Harvey Oswald, and we matched the two together. That's how that story was prepared and created, I should say.
And these articles that pertain to Ted Cruz, are they mostly around the spring of 2016?
May I see that?
Handing?
Yes.
I'm talking about the whole bunch of them. If you want, we can flip through them just to make sure you are comfortable answering that.
Yes.
So the question is, are these articles mostly around the spring?
Mostly around the spring.
Of 2016?
Yes.
Had Ted Cruz been gaining popularity as a candidate at that time?
I believe so.
Finally, I'm going to show you 153C and ask you, to whom do these headlines pertain?
Marco Rubio.
And were these articles published toward the end of 2015, beginning of 2016?
Yes, they were.
And had Marco Rubio been gaining popularity at that time?
I believe he was.
Do you remember when he dropped out of the race?
No, I don't.
Why were you running these stories about Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz and Ben Carson?
After the Republican debates, and based on the success of some of the other candidates, I would receive a call from Michael Cohen, and he would direct me and direct Dylan Howard on which candidate and which direction we should go. That's how the process happened.
Now, I started to ask you before, did there come a time when then-candidate Trump introduced you to Stephen Bannon?
Yes, he did.
Do you remember around when that was?
It was October of 2016.
Who was Stephen Bannon at the time?
Stephen Bannon was a political consultant for Donald Trump.
And was he working on Donald Trump's campaign?
Yes, it was my understanding he was working on the campaign.
What, if anything, did Mr. Trump tell you about Stephen Bannon?
He said to me that I believed that you and Stephen would get along really well. And Bannon, when I spoke to him, he said that he went through some of these articles that you just displayed now. He liked them very much. He had some other ideas, and would I be able to get him some other issues of the National Enquirer he could take a look at. So in that meeting, I boxed up a bunch of issues of the National Enquirer that had Hillary and stories along those lines, and I remember sending it to his apartment. It was someplace on the Upper West Side.
His apartment being?
Stephen Bannon's apartment.
Did Donald Trump tell you specifically what, or even generally what he wanted you to do vis-a-vis Stephen Bannon?
He said that he thought that both of us could work very well together. And then after Bannon reviewed the articles, he called me and he said that...
Objection.
Sustained.
When you were starting to answer, don't say what he or she was going to say. Who is the he that you were referring to in the answer that you were just about to give? Is the he Stephen Bannon, or was the he Donald Trump?
The he was Stephen Bannon.
What did you do after withdrawn? Did Mr. Bannon ever pitch any articles to the National Enquirer?
Objection.
Overruled. You can answer.
What he suggested was that, based on some of the Hillary articles that we had, that we should take a National Enquirer reporter and have them go on the Hannity show and discuss the articles with Hannity.
Articles that you had written?
Objection. Move to strike.
Sustained. That answer is stricken.
So I am not asking you about articles that you did run or you had already run. Did Stephen Bannon ever ask you to run any particular articles?
Objection. May I be heard at sidebar?
Sure.
Whereupon proceedings were held at sidebar.
Thank you for hearing me, Judge. This is entirely hearsay. I understand that the witness at times is going beyond what Mr. Steinglass is asking. I respect that. In terms of whatever the jury is hearing regarding admissible testimony, I don't think there is much of any with respect to this topic on Mr. Bannon.
Mr. Steinglass.
First of all, none of the statements that were elicited are hearsay at all. They're not statements that are being offered for the truth of the matter asserted. These are people who are at the defendant's behest, who are working with the witness to either pump up the positive stories about Mr. Trump or pump negative stories about the opponents. That is part of the whole scheme here. These are almost like verbal acts. It's not for the truth of the matter being asserted if the witness is asked if Stephen Bannon asked the witness to run a particular story.
So you are not offering the statement for its truth? I need to give the jury an instruction.
These stories, he is not offering these stories, but the fact that Stephen Bannon asked this of the witness for the truth. He wants to put in evidence that Stephen Bannon asked this to show that Stephen Bannon did, in fact, ask it. That's the definition of for the truth. That is pure hearsay, the stories. He is not putting the stories in. He is putting testimony about what Stephen Bannon did.
I think there are several answers to that, but at least one of them is, if there are multiple co-conspirators, this is going to come up soon anyway. If there are multiple co-conspirators who are conspiring to influence the election under the election law, that is part of the secondary crime, which we have to prove, that there is a conspiracy to influence the election. So this seems to me to be the heart of the admissible evidence in this case. So I think it's res gesti of that conspiracy. It's res gesti and co-conspirator statements.
Res gesti doesn't overcome the hearsay exception. This is the first we're hearing from the government about Stephen Bannon being an alleged co-conspirator in connection with the so-called conspiracy to influence the election. The government just elicited testimony that he is a member of the campaign working to do, at best, based on the hearsay that's been elicited so far, normal traditional campaign work that everybody does. This should not come in as a co-conspirator statement.
I will excuse the jury.
Thereupon, the following proceedings were held in open court.
We're going to go ahead and take a short break at the time. You can step out.
Jury leaving courtroom.
Mr. Pecker, you can step out. Witness leaving courtroom.
As I was saying at sidebar, we object to this line of inquiry because what's happening? The government is eliciting hearsay statements from Stephen Bannon as a declarant. They're being offered for their truth. There's also been no notice that the government considers Mr. Bannon to be a co-conspirator in this case. As the court knows, there is no conspiracy charged in the indictment. Statements by a campaign staff member doing normal campaign work do not further any alleged conspiracy that the people are relying on as a predicate act. And the limiting instruction that you are giving with respect to the newspaper articles could not adequately cure the risk of prejudice. When we're talking about testimony from statements like this, it's just very far afield from what the charges are in this case, what has been alleged before this line was elicited about how this conspiracy functioned. And so the reason I asked for the sidebar, it's difficult on a question-by-question basis other than just continually, we think this whole line is inadmissible.
People.
So, several things. First of all, part of what we will be eliciting here is what Stephen Bannon asked the witness to do. The question is not hearsay. It's not a statement that is being offered for the truth. It is, as I suggested at the bench, much more akin to a verbal act. Moreover, and let me just say, I think that we've gotten enough on this topic, so I don't really need to go back into it. This may be moot. I do see this coming up. Counsel said it yesterday in the opening, and Mr. Bove said it again, and I think there is a misperception about the law and about what this case is about. It is true that there is no conspiracy charge on the indictment. However, as the court is aware, falsifying business records in the first degree requires an intent to defraud that includes the intent to commit or conceal another crime. The primary crime that we have alleged is New York State Election Law Section 17, 152. There is conspiracy language in the statute. In that statute it reads, any two or more persons who conspire to promote or prevent the election of any person to a public office by unlawful means, and which conspiracy is acted upon by one or more of the parties thereto, shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. So while it's true that there is no conspiracy in the second-degree charge on the indictment, it is not true that a conspiracy has not always been alleged to be part of this case. The entire case is predicated on the idea that there was a conspiracy to influence the election in 2016. Mr. Bove may interpret some of the evidence in a way that is different from the way that we interpret it, but that's what the jury's role is, to interpret what the nature and scope of that conspiracy was. This is evidence that will aid them in making that determination.
So I agree with what you are saying, Mr. Steinglass. My concern is, did you give any notice that you intended to elicit this type of information and ask these type of questions from this witness about Mr. Bannon?
No, I don't think that we did, although I am not sure that there is a requirement that we do so. That being said, I think this issue will come up with other testimony more so, and we can stop asking questions about Stephen Bannon and his involvement in this conspiracy.
Since we're talking about it now...
I am sorry. One thing more I will say, I don't mean to interrupt you. To finish my thought, Bannon's name is all over the exhibits and the discovery that we provided to counsel. So even though we never specifically say there is a view of the evidence that he could be considered a co-conspirator in this aspect of the conspiracy, it is not like this is the first time they're hearing his name.
Yes.
I think there are about 11 million pages of discovery. So the fact that somebody's name appeared in those pages, I'm not sure that puts anybody on notice that hearsay from that person as a declarant at this trial is going to be elicited. There is no misperception on this side about the predicate that Mr. Steinglass just talked about. I think what the issue is that the existence of a conspiracy argument is not the sole requirement for the hearsay exception we're talking about. The statement that is being offered also has to further the conspiracy at issue. I don't think there is any basis for a conclusion that what was just elicited from Mr. Pecker regarding Mr. Bannon is furthering the conspiracy that is alleged as the predicate to the charges in the indictment. What that was, I submit, is very normal standard campaign work. And I agree with Mr. Steinglass, that is the type of thing that will come up throughout the trial. That predicate should not be used as an excuse to shovel in hearsay from witnesses who will testify at the trial.
Let me hear from Mr. Steinglass.
I think we disagree with that characterization. To the extent that Mr. Bannon could be seen as a person who is contributing to the endeavor to publish negative stories about Mr. Trump's political opponents, that is very much a part of the conspiracy. True, that in and of itself might not be criminal. We can have much debate back and forth on this. In connection with all of the other evidence in the case, and the robust components of the agreement that was forged at Trump Tower to influence the election, that was a piece of it. The evidence doesn't have to be conclusive to be admissible. It has to be relevant, and it's relevant to this idea of the conspiracy, whether Mr. Bove has a proved innocent explanation for it or not.
All right. With regard to Mr. Bannon, at this point it appears to be a moot point because you are going to move on, right?
Yes.
This is something that we need to move on moving forward. I do agree with the people's assertions that they are required to prove that there was an intent to commit another crime. And in this case, the court has given the people permission to pursue 3 different theories of that. So long as the people can establish that the testimony that is being elicited does advance one of those 3 theories, I think it's fine. I think it's acceptable.
Just so I understand it, when you say advance, you mean the otherwise inadmissible hearsay at issue to further the predicate that we're talking about?
It has to be viewed in context. The one statement that is made may not move the ball, but if that one statement in the context of everything else does, then it would be admissible. Let's take a brief recess.
Recess. Witness entering. Whereupon the witness, David Pecker, having been previously duly sworn and or affirmed, resumes the witness stand and testifies as follow. Jurors entering. Whereupon the jurors and the alternate jurors are present and properly seated.
Mr. Steinglass.
Thank you. During the time that you were the CEO at AMI, did you have access to the business records of AMI?
Yes, I did.
And did the business records of AMI include invoices, ouchers, general ledger entries, non-disclosure agreements, and amendments related to the subject matter of this case?
Yes, they do.
Do the records also include emails and texts back and forth between and among AMI employees, as well as useness-related texts and emails between AMI employees and third parties?
Yes, they do.
Were those records, emails, and texts kept and maintained on AMI servers, computers, and employee cell phones?
Yes.
I am now going to hand you a thumb drive. I'm going to ask you to take a look at it and let us know if you've had an opportunity to review the documents contained on that thumb drive.
Yes, I have.
How do you know?
I have my signature and the date that I looked at it.
Have you had an opportunity to review each of the files contained on that thumb drive?
Yes, I have.
A moment ago, I asked you if some of the exhibits on the thumb drive contain emails.
Yes.
Does AMI maintain a server that hosts its emails?
Yes, they do.
Do those servers capture information associated with emails, including the to, the from, the date, the time sent, things like that?
Yes, they do.
And is that information generally accurately contained in the header of each email?
Yes.
And do you expect that information to be accurately recorded in the email system at AMI?
Yes, I do.
Are the emails and headers captured and maintained on the server in the ordinary course of AMI business?
Yes, they are.
And is email used in part to conduct AMI business?
Yes.
Are business emails relied upon in making business decisions?
Yes, they are.
And do the emails contained in these exhibits appear to be in the standard AMI email format, including the headers? Before you answer that, I'm referring specifically to the emails contained in People's Exhibits 163 to 170. Now you can answer.
Oh, yes, they are.
Now, directing your attention to People's Exhibits 171 through 179, do some of the exhibits on the thumb drive contain texts among AMI employees and between AMI employees and third parties?
Yes, they do.
Are those texts stored on AMI employee devices?
Yes, they are.
Do the devices capture information associated with the texts again, including the to, the from, the date, and the time sent?
Yes.
And do you expect that information to be accurately recorded on those devices?
Yes, I do.
During the time of your employment, did you have a company-owned cell phone?
Yes, I did.
Was that phone used for business purposes?
Yes.
To the extent that AMI employees' phones are used for business purposes, does AMI have the ability to extract business-related information from those phones, including texts?
Yes, they do.
Have you ever participated in other situations where litigation required AMI to collect and provide text messages from employee phones?
Yes, I did.
And very generally speaking, how is that accomplished?
The IT department. The legal department would put a legal hold, send it to the IT department, and the IT director would actually put a hold on all of the content. All of the content that was related to that case, or that issue. and you would receive a letter from legal department telling you that this is being done.
When you say IT, is that information technology?
Sorry, information technology. Sorry about that.
It's okay. So, during those instances where it became necessary to take the texts from the employees' phones, did AMI have the ability to physically take possession of those phones to download or otherwise forensically image the texts that were the subject of the litigation hold?
Yes, the legal department would actually call and ask for the phone, and they would do it from there with the the Information Technology Department.
Right, thank you. Are texts used in part to conduct AMI business?
Yes.
And are such texts relied upon in making business decisions?
Yes, they are.
Were the text exchanges contained on that thumb drive collected and produced by AMI and its employees in response to a search warrant seeking documents and communications relevant to the subject matter of this case?
Yes.
Do the texts contained in these exhibits appear to be in the format in which AMI produced them in response to the search warrant?
Yes.
Are People's Exhibits 171 through 178 text message files that were produced by AMI as Microsoft Excel documents?
Yes.
And are People's Exhibits 171A through 178A PDF versions of the corresponding numbered exhibit?
Yes, they are.
80, for example, People's 171A is a PDF version of the Excel document of the document marked 171?
Yes.
Are the PDF versions our exact copies?
Yes, they are.
For each of the various types of records that you just mentioned, that is the emails, the texts, and also the vouchers, the general ledger entries, the non-disclosure agreements, the amendments, for each of those types of records, are they generated in the regular and ordinary course of business of AMI?
Yes, they are.
And is it part of the business of AMI to make and keep these records?
Yes.
Are the entries in those records made at or close to the time of the transaction or events to which they relate?
Yes, they are.
And is the person or persons who makes them under a business duty to do so accurately?
Yes.
Okay. I offer into evidence People's Exhibits 154 through 170, also 179, and the A's of this for 171A through 178A.
Can you repeat that?
Sure.
154 through 170.
154 through 170, 179, and then the A's of this for 171, A through 178.
So that would be 171A, 172A, all the way up to 178A. Any objections?
Yes, Judge.
What are the grounds for your objections?
The hearsay objections that I raised yesterday, as well as the testimony that was just given about vouchers.
Come up.
Whereupon the following proceedings were held at sidebar.
Thank you, Judge. So, the text message exhibits are 1, as I understand, 171 through 179.
That's what I have.
With the cash pays. To the extent those text messages were originated by Mr. Pecker, we object on the hearsay grounds I articulated yesterday, that even if they are business records, the statements in the text messages are being offered for the truth, and they are inadmissible hearsay on that basis. When Mr. Pecker is a communicant on the text messages, I understand those can come in, and the person he's communicating with, the other side of those messages can come in for context. There may be a subsequent point at this trial where other witnesses testify and make other of these texts, messages admissible. The fact that the text messages are business records, I agree the Foundation has.
Are these being offered for the truth?
Yeah, I think they are. I think to the extent that I think there's two separate issues here. One is, are they business records? It sounds like the defense is not contesting that.
Right.
The second is, are there perhaps embedded hearsay in some of these, not admissible by another hearsay exception?
Right.
We're all working hard here. I do feel like it's a little late in the game to be raising these objections. They've had these exhibits for 9 months, and they've been designated as exhibits since August of last year. But to the extent that there may be some embedded hearsay in some of those, I think what the defense needs to do is identify those portions of the exhibits that they believe is embedded hearsay, and then we can have argument as to whether or not there's a valid hearsay objection. But we've laid a foundation they're admissible as business records. To the extent...
There is. They're admissible as business records. There's no dispute with that. But if it's hearsay, it's still hearsay, and you still have to get it out. I don't think the solution now is to send the defense back to look through each one of these exhibits. If you know anyone you're offering contains hearsay, maybe you can make it easier for all of us.
Well, laughs. I don't mean to be laughing, Judge. There's a lot of exhibits here, and there is a lot of text back and forth. It's our position that primarily, there's one thing that Mr. Bove said that I very much don't agree with, which is that there's some relevance to whether the declarant is present. A business record is a business record if it's between two people.
We don't need to get bogged down with that. All I care about is there hearsay or isn't there hearsay?
The reason I'm saying that two AMI employees having a text about a particular story like the Dino Sajudin story, that is admissible hearsay.
It doesn't matter that he's not here testifying.
Both of them.
Right. It doesn't matter provided that they come in under some other exception.
Okay.
Because it would still be hearsay even if it's a business record.
Well, okay. But I will say a couple of things. First, I think that the fact that it's a business record may mean that conversations among employees about business-related matters are admissible because they're business records, even if, otherwise, there would be no business record. Everything in a business record is arguably an out-of-court statement being offered for the truth. So I do think that, for example, if a person who was a party to a conversation was not under a business duty to do so accurately, that would be embedded hearsay, and that would need to find another exception to the hearsay rule. I believe the primary exception to the hearsay rule on which we would rely is co-conspirator hearsay. And I believe the testimony of Mr. Pecker has already established a prima facie case of conspiracy, so that statements made in the business records that are in furtherance of that conspiracy would be admissible in addition on those grounds. But I think I am suggesting gently that it would be an uncharitable view of the business records, exception to suggest that every statement contained in a business record has to be independently admissible under some objection other than business records.
I agree.
Judge, that's the law, that when there's embedded hearsay within hearsay, that there has to be another basis for the statements to be admissible. That's in the New York Rules of Evidence. It is not an exception to the hearsay rule that the communicants are each employees at the company whose business records are being offered. The fact that the employees are on those records does not make them admissible. There's not been a foundation laid for a suggestion, if I understood it correctly, that AMI, every name of an employee is charged with a conspiracy, is charged as a predicate. It is their burden to establish admissibility.
I'm accepting the records into evidence as business records. If something comes up that you believe is hearsay and is not admissible, you can make your objection.
Just can I lay out numbers?
Yes.
173 and 174 are text messages between Mr. Pecker and Dylan Howard. So we are not objecting to those coming in on this hearsay within hearsay argument on the basis I described. Mr. Pecker, I understand, comes in. Mr. Howard's statements are inadmissible hearsay, but they're admissible to provide contents to what Mr. Pecker said. 171A, for example, is a series of messages between Dylan Howard and Gina Rodriguez, with factual assertions being offered for the truth. So we can address them in real time. We raised this yesterday. We sent the people more NS last night at 8 o'clock. I respect that the people were observing last night.
I know.
I understand the timing of this. We'll continue to communicate with them on it. What I would ask for this afternoon, when we're short on time, I've identified 2 strings where the witness is on the stand, that we cover those, and we talk a little more about the others.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Whereupon the following proceedings were held in open court.
Your objection is noted and overruled. The documents are accepted into evidence as business records. To the extent that there may be any embedded hearsay within them, we'll deal with it as it comes in.
Thank you, Judge.
Does the name Dino Sajudin mean anything to you?
Yes? Who is Dino Sajudin?
Dino Sajudin was a doorman at Trump Tower. How did you come to learn about Dino Sajudin?
Dylan Howard came to me with respect to a tip that he heard, and his reporters heard that.
Judge, objection to the substance of the tip based on your in limine ruling.
Overruled.
Can you answer? Just speak a little louder and closer to the microphone.
Okay, thank you. What I was saying is, Dylan came to me. He received, when I say a source, from one of his IP sources that Dino was in the market, selling a story that Donald Trump fathered an illegitimate girl with a maid at Trump Tower, and the maid worked in Mr. Trump's penthouse.
Roughly, when was it that Dylan Howard came to you with this information about this source?
It was, as I recall, October of 2015.
What did you do after you learned about this story about Mr. Trump fathering an illegitimate child with his housekeeper?
I immediately called Michael Cohen, and I described to him exactly what I was told by Dylan, and in addition, I also gave him the name. I gave him Dino's name, and I gave him the name of the housekeeper in the penthouse, and I asked him to verify that, first with the Trump Organization payroll, to see actually, if they were actually there during this period of time or not. And immediately Michael Cohen said to me, he says, absolutely not true. He says, but I'll check it out.
When he said absolutely not true, did you take that to mean that he was denying that Mr. Trump had in fact fathered a child with his housekeeper?
That's correct.
Now, why upon learning of this story did you reach out to Michael Cohen in the first place?
In August, we had our meeting in August. We had our agreement that anything that I heard in the marketplace that was going to be negative to Trump, to Mr. Trump or his family or the campaign, I would notify Michael Cohen immediately.
So this was part of the agreement that you had made?
Yes.
How did you leave it with Michael Cohen after that first call?
That he would verify the names and that he would call me back.
Okay, tell the jury what happened next.
So, Michael Cohen called me back, if it was that day or the next day, and said that he verified the two names on payroll, so they actually worked there. And he asked me to check out the story.
Did he indicate one way or the other whether he had spoken to Mr. Trump about the story?
Pause. I believe that was at a later time.
I'm sorry?
I believe that was later, at a later time.
Got it. How did you leave it after that second call?
I spoke to Dylan, and I asked Dylan to check the story out, to verify whether it could be true or not, and to, 1, we should prepare a source agreement. We should have Dino take a polygraph.
Stop right there. I didn't mean to interrupt you. What you were about to say, don't say that. Just say, please, what steps you were going to take to pursue the story, not referring to the last thing you mentioned.
I asked Dylan to verify if the story was true or not.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned a source document, yes?
Yes.
What is a source document?
A source document is an agreement with a potential source or tipster that they have a story. And the agreement is between the magazine and the tipster or the source that says for a period of time, 90 days, 120 days, we have exclusive rights. The magazine has exclusive rights to the story. And then there's a compensation in the agreement based on if the story is published or not.
Did you enter into such an agreement with Mr. Sajudin?
Yes, we did.
How did that come about?
I asked Dylan to negotiate a price, to negotiate a number, a price to buy the story and take it off the market, and Dylan went ahead. And there was two parts to this. The first part is, our normal procedures is we have the source or the tipster take a polygraph test, and we normally pay $500 for a polygraph test. So we took the polygraph.
Please don't tell us any polygraph results, just keep that.
I pursued the story after. I pursued the story, that's what he said. We pursued the story.
Did you discuss the purchase of the story with Michael Cohen?
Yes.
Tell us about that conversation.
I called Michael Cohen up. I called Michael Cohen, and I said that we have to go forward with the story. And he said, how much? I said, Dylan negotiated a price of $30,000. So he said, who's going to pay for it? So I said, I'll pay for it. This can be a very big story. I believe it's important that it should be removed from the market. So we'll acquire the story. And then he said, thank you very much. He thanked me, and he said that the boss would be very pleased.
Who did you understand the boss to be?
The boss would be Donald Trump.
Now, you said earlier that at some point it became clear to you that Michael Cohen had spoken with Donald Trump about the Dino Sajudin story?
Yes.
Can you tell us what makes you say that?
Because there was a second conversation after that, where he called and said that the story is absolutely not true. He said that Mr. Trump would take a DNA test, that he is German-Irish, and this woman is Hispanic, and it's absolutely impossible. And I told Michael Cohen that won't be necessary. We'll vet the story.
So, let me be clear about something. Prior to this arrangement to purchase this story from Dino Sajudin, had you ever paid a source to kill a story about Donald Trump?
No, I did not.
Now, what was the reason that you were willing to pay for this story at this point?
I had a number of reasons. 1, I thought it was very important that Dino wouldn't be shopping the story to other media outlets, and it would get in the marketplace very quickly. That was part 1. Part 2, I bought the story. If the story was true and I published it, it would be probably the biggest sale of the National Enquirer since the death of Elvis Presley.
Did you have any intention of publishing it at the time you negotiated this deal? At that time, no.
What was your intention in terms of publishing it, depending on how your vetting went?
If the story came back true, I would have published the story shortly after it was verified.
Before or after the election?
I would have published it after the election.
So, even if the vetting came back that you believed the story to be true, you would have held the story until after the presidential election of 2016.
That was the conversation I had with Michael Cohen, and that's what we agreed to. Just to be clear, during the period when this deal was being negotiated, did you ever speak directly with Mr. Trump about the doorman story? Or did all conversations go through Michael Cohen at this point?
All my conversations were directly with Michael Cohen.
I think you told us you did, in fact, enter into a contract with the doorman, correct, with Mr. Sajuddin?
Yes.
I'm going to display to everyone, since it's in evidence, People's Exhibit 154. So this is page 1 of People's 154. Do you recognize this document?
Yes, I do.
What is this?
This is the source document with Dino Sajuddin.
Is this an exact copy of the agreement that AMI entered into with Mr. Sajuddin regarding the story that the defendant had fathered a child with his housekeeper?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to blow up the top of it and ask you, this agreement dated?
November 15th, 2015.
So the part at the top, can you read us that whole part that's blown up?
$30, $1,000 payable upon publication is set.
That's the payment?
That's the payment.
And who is the source?
The source is Dino Sajuddin.
You see where it says exclusive?
No response.
Below payment.
Yes, I see it. I'm sorry. Should I read it?
If you don't mind, would you rather me read it? It's long.
Source shall provide AMI with information Donald Trump's illegitimate child, and any and all documentation, including but not limited to letters and any legal documents and photographs in source's possession relevant to the exclusive.
Can you read the handwritten portion as well?
AMT agrees not to. I can't read that word. Name. Name. Identify source in any published articles.
Okay, is there a date to indicate when that handwritten portion was added?
Also November 15th, 2015.
There's also a heading called exclusivity period, right?
Exclusivity period. Yes, that's correct.
What is the exclusivity period at this point?
That was our exclusivity to own the article for it says here for 3 months, which is the normal process, 90 days after we published the exclusive.
So, in layman's terms, for people who are not in the publishing business, what does this mean?
It means that we hold the article, and it's up to the publisher, or it's up to the publisher whether they're going to publish the article or not. And in paying the $30,000, you have the full exclusive for it, and you have the choice whether to publish the article or not.
You retain the ability to decide whether or not to publish this article?
We had the rights to publish it. Yes, that's correct.
But meanwhile, Mr. Sajuddin couldn't take this story anywhere else?
That's correct.
I'm going to show you People's 155 in evidence. I'm going to ask you if you know what this document is.
No response.
Do you want me to blow up the top?
Yes. It's an amendment to the agreement.
So is this People's 155 an amendment to the source agreement that we just saw as People's 154?
Yes, that's correct.
And when is the amendment dated?
December 17th, 2015.
Okay, you see that at the bottom of the page?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to ask that we blow up paragraphs 1, 2, and 3 of this amendment. And I'm going to ask you, how did this amendment amend the original agreement? What are the ways in which it amended it? I'm going to ask you to walk us through, maybe even read paragraphs 1, 2, and 3.
Paragraph 1. AMI shall pay source the payment set forth in the agreement within 5 days of the receipt of this amendment signed by source. So, we paid him the $30,000 within, by the agreement, 5 days from when the agreement was signed.
Let me stop you before we move on to the next paragraph. Is it unusual to pay a source before the story is run?
Yes, it is.
Why did you do that in this case? Why amend the agreement in this way?
Dylan finished the vetting of the story, and we hired a private investigator. We sent reporters out to where supposedly the illegitimate child was, and we discovered that it was absolutely 1,000% untrue.
So why are you paying $30,000 for an untrue story?
Because the article says that if the story got out to another publication or another media outlet, it would have been very embarrassing to the campaign.
So this was a way to lock it up?
That's correct.
Okay, paragraph 2. How? Can you read that to us and tell us how that modified the original agreement?
The exclusivity period set forth in the agreement is extended in perpetuity and shall not expire, which means that we own this story forever.
The original source agreement, I believe you told us?
90 days.
Plus 90 days, and now it's...
evergreen.
Forever. Do you mind if I ask you to read that?
Yes. Source agrees that he shall not disclose the exclusive or the terms of the agreement or this amendment to any third party except as required by law or court order, provided source gives BMI prompt written notice of such requirement or order, so AMT may seek an appropriate protective order or other relief. In the event source breaches this provision, source shall be liable to AMI and shall pay to AMI as liquidated damages, and not as a penalty the sum of $1 million, which amount represents the result of a reasonable endeavor by AMI to ascertain the fair average compensation for any damages that AMI will sustain as the result of such disclosure, and that the amount of those damages is impracticable to calculate or ascertain with certainty or specificity.
What does that mean to the...
What it means is that if you don't mind, I'm going to call him the doorman. If the doorman went out and tried to, after receiving the $30,000, went out and tried to sell the story, and that whoever looked at it, they would know before anybody would publish anything that story. They would also find out the same results that we did, that the story was false. He, being the doorman, would breach this agreement and owe American media $1 million. So it was basically a lever over him to make sure that wouldn't happen.
To make sure that he didn't tell his story to someone else?
Someone else. That's correct.
So you told us, and this makes it clear, that you paid, to use your phrase, the doorman $30,000. Is that a typical sum for a source?
No, it's not.
How is it atypical?
A typical source payment can be anywhere from $250 to $5, 1,000. Or, if it's a bigger celebrity, up to $10, 1,000.
So why pay so much for this story?
I made the decision to buy the story because of the potential embarrassment it would have to the campaign.
To the campaign?
And Mr. Trump.
The campaign and Mr. Trump?
Yeah.
What about the $1 million liquidated damages? Is that a typical sum?
No, it's not.
Where did that come from?
When I was finalizing this amendment, I had several conversations with Michael Cohen, and Michael Cohen suggested that the opportunity to put in for liquidated damages and the $1 million penalty. So that's why I asked Dylan to include it in this agreement.
Based on your conversations with Michael Cohen?
Yes.
What about the extending it that you heard from 90 days to in perpetuity? Whose idea was that?
I think that was done jointly between myself and Michael Cohen.
Okay, I am now going to display for you People's Exhibit 164 in evidence, page 1.
Objection. I ask that this be taken down.
Please approach. Can you bring the exhibit?
Sure.
Whereupon the following proceedings were held at sidebar.
I have a hard copy I can show you. This is 164. Is your objection in reference to the polygraph?
Two issues. One is, there's a reference to the polygraph. When there was testimony about this, I didn't want to jump up and draw attention to it. It was not intentional, I see. We will ask for a limiting instruction tomorrow on this issue. I thought this exhibit with the specific reference of the polygraph should be redacted. But in addition, I don't think this is the one.
164, right?
164.
This is an email where there are factual assertions being offered for its truth that should not come in through this witness. This is the hearsay.
This is a perfect example of what I think is a business record.
Thereupon the document is shown to the court.
Notwithstanding the fact that it contains reference to non-testifying witnesses, kind of vintage business record.
This is exactly what a business record is. I have no problem with it.
Just so the record is clear,
Sure.
I appreciate you hearing me out on this. We're not disputing it's a business record. We're saying the text of the making factual assertions that require an independent hearsay exception, and there's not one for these assertions.
I disagree, and I think Your Honor has acknowledged that. This says polygraph letter. It doesn't say anything about polygraph result. I think it's fine. If you want, I can redact that.
Can you redact the polygraph portion of it?
Sure.
Other than that, I'll accept it.
Thank you.
Whereupon the following proceedings were held in open court.
Subject to the redaction we discussed, the exhibit can be displayed.
People's 164, we'll put it back up. Can you tell us a little bit about this email, first of all? Well, actually, my first question, is this an email?
Yes, it's an email.
The second question is, what is the date of the email?
December 18th, 2015.
And who is it from?
Natasha is a reporter that works for Dylan Howard, and Liz Ruotolo, sorry about this, Liz Ruotolo is an accounts payable person at American Media.
So it's an email from a reporter to an accounts payable person?
That's correct.
Is Dylan Howard among the people that are CC'd on the email?
Yes.
Does the email reference attachments?
Yes.
And I'm going to scroll to page 2 and read the attachment in a minute. Here it is.
Whereupon an exhibit is shown on the screens.
Here's page 2. Is this the attachment that was included with the email?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so going back to page 1, can you just read us the substance of the email? Is that...
It, plus it's all the paperwork to send the...
We're going to fix this.
Whereupon an exhibit is shown on the screens.
To send the wire transfer, which is what the email is requesting, you need all the supporting documentation. So the supporting documentation would be the invoice which is attached, the source agreement, and the copy that has 2 parts to it, his W-9, and I guess whatever agreements that they had.
Is the W-9 a tax form?
W-9 is a tax form, correct.
Is this essentially directing the person in accounts payable to pay Mr. Sajudin as part of the contract that you had entered into with him?
That is correct.
And page 2, is that the invoice for the payment here?
Yes, and that would be an invoice that the company internally would have prepared.
Okay, who does it say this attachment is from?
Barry Levine is the East Coast news director for the National Enquirer, and he sent an email to his reporter.
So why was the invoice prepared by someone at AMT, even though it was billing AMI?
Objection.
Sustained.
Was the invoice prepared by someone at AMI?
Objection.
If you know, you can answer.
Our sources are single, are people who don't have any companies. They don't have the availability to create an invoice. So once we have the source agreement prepared, and to process it through the AMI system, you need an invoice. So the source agreement supports the invoice, what the amount is going to be and who is being paid for. And then we have the W-9 prepared, so the source will sign it, so we withhold the taxes.
Objection. Move to strike.
Overruled.
Can you read the body of the email or, I guess, the invoice attachment?
This serves as an invoice for an immediate $30,000 bank transfer payment from AMI to source Dino Sajudin regarding Trump non-published story.
Before you move on, what did you understand Trump non-published story to be a reference to?
Well, Barry Levine.
Objection.
Overruled. You can answer.
Barry Levine would know. Knows because he was told that we're not going to publish any negative stories on Donald Trump. So he correctly wrote the email to state here that it wasn't going to be published.
Okay, and you can keep going. Read the next one.
I'm sorry. Attached is the paperwork, including the execution of the contract amendment signed by Mr. Sajudin, as prepared yesterday by Cameron Straker for this sole purpose of payment.
Who is Cameron Straker?
He was the general counsel in American media.
Thank you. So you told us a minute ago that after you investigated the story, you determined that it was not true.
That's correct.
And did you communicate that to Michael Cohen?
Yes, I did.
And can you describe that?
I told Michael Cohen the story was not true. I told him that the doorman is very difficult to deal with. I mentioned to him that he's probably going to try to shop the story to someone else, and that we don't really share any concerns here since the story is not true anyhow, so I would suggest that we release him.
And how did Michael Cohen react to that?
Michael Cohen said, first he didn't understand why I would ever release him, and then I said that, to have him locked into us, it's only going to cause more problems. So I suggested that I'm going to release him one way or the other, so I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So he said, when? And I said, well, I'd like to release him now. He said, no, you release him after the election.
So Michael Cohen asked you not to release Dino Sajudin from the source agreement until after the presidential election?
Yes.
And just to be clear, Mr. Pecker, did any AMI publications ever print Mr. Sajudin's story?
No, they didn't.
Did there come a time when you did release the doorman from the exclusivity agreement?
Yes, I did.
I'm showing you now People's 169 that's in evidence.
Same objection, Judge.
Noted.
Can you blow it up a little bit, please?
So what is this?
No response.
Generally speaking.
I just want to say, Sharon Churcher is another reporter that worked for Barry Levine. And Cam is saying here to Dino that he is confirming what Sharon told him, that Dino has the right to go ahead and sell or market the story.
Okay. So, generally speaking, is this an email from Cameron Straker, who I believe you told us was the general counsel?
Yes.
To Dino Sajudin?
That's correct.
Do you understand this email to be informing Mr. Sajudin that he has now been released from the exclusivity agreement that you had signed, that AMI had signed with him?
Yes, that's what he requested for a long period of time.
When was he released? When was this email sent?
December 9th, 2016.
After the presidential election?
Yes.
Do you know somebody named Karen McDougal?
Yes, I do.
Who is Karen McDougal?
Karen McDougal was a Playboy model.
How did you first hear of her?
Dylan came to me in early June of 2016 and said that he received a call from one of his major sources in California that there's a Playboy model who is trying to sell a story about a relationship that she had with Donald Trump for a year.
What kind of relationship? A romantic relationship? Did he say one way or the other whether it included a sexual relationship?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that. I apologize.
Sorry. Did Dylan Howard, when you first learned of this story, did Dylan Howard tell you whether or not the story, the relationship that you described that Ms. McDougal was referring to, included a sexual component?
Yes, he did.
Yes, he told you?
He thought that. He didn't know at that time.
Okay, so What did you do when you learned about Karen McDougal and her claims regarding Mr. Trump?
I called Michael Cohen, and I told Michael Cohen exactly what Dylan told me about this Playboy model and that she had a relationship. I didn't even finish the conversation, and immediately, when he said, "That's untrue, absolutely not true," so I said, "Just wait a second. This is a little different." I said, "I think that we should vet the story out first." So he thought. Michael Cohen said, "Yes, I think that's a good idea," he said. I said, "I'm going to speak to Dylan, and I'll let you know what our next steps are going to be."
Did you discuss at that point payment for this story?
No, we did not.
What did you discuss in terms of next steps?
Dylan, when I mentioned to him that I wanted to vet the story out, we should proceed on verifying it. He had a conversation with his source, who is an attorney, who is representing this Playboy model. I did not know the name. I did not know any amounts. That's all that I knew. So I told him to go out to California, interview the model, the Playboy model, and let me know what the details are. I called back Michael Cohen, and I told him what I was going to do, and I told him that we would keep him apprised after Dylan went out and found out exactly what the details were.
Okay, so just to clarify the pronouns, when you said you asked him to go out and interview the person, you asked who to go out?
I asked Dylan Howard. I asked Dylan Howard to go.
And did you tell Michael Cohen that you were doing that?
Yes, I called Michael Cohen and I told him exactly that.
Around this time, around how often were you speaking to Michael Cohen?
I was speaking to him prior to this, probably a couple of times a week. When this subject came up, this issue came up, I spoke to him much more frequently. Almost every day. Sometimes a couple of times a day.
Do you remember about when it was that you were having these conversations?
As I recall, it was the first week of June.
Which year?
I'm sorry, 2016.
Did Michael Cohen ask you on occasion to communicate with him through any particular means?
Yes. Michael Cohen said to me that we shouldn't be talking like this over a landline. He said we should use Signal. I didn't really know what Signal was. I never heard of it before. And he said it was an app. He explained to me that it was an encrypted app where nobody could trace it, and that there's no paper trail, and there's nobody that can listen in to the conversations. And then the conversation, apparently, is destroyed after you have the call. I still to this day don't know if that's true or not.
Did you agree to use the Signal app to communicate with Michael Cohen from time to time?
I did, and every time I used it, it dropped off after like 30 seconds, but I would call back.
Did there come a time? Did you ever come to believe that Michael Cohen had spoken with Mr. Trump about Ms. McDougal's claims?
Yes, I did.
Can you explain to the jury how you became to believe that?
I was in New Jersey at my largest investigator in American media, making a business presentation. And their assistant for their office came in and said, "Donald Trump is on the phone for you." So I left to pick up the phone to speak to Mr. Trump. And he mentioned to me that, he said, "I spoke to Michael." He said, he told me about, he told me about Karen. And he said to me, what do you think? So I said that after Dylan Howard interviewed her, she claimed that she had an offer from ABC, Dancing with the Stars, for her story. And she had, and there was an offer from a Mexican group from what Mr. Trump told me, was $8 million. And I said, "No, I don't believe there was an offer for $8 million. It's my understanding that she doesn't want her story published. And I think that the story should be purchased. And I believe that you should buy it." And Mr. Trump said to me, he said, "Look, everything." He says, "I don't buy any stories." And he said that, "Anytime you do anything like this, it always gets out." So I said, "I still believe that we should take this story off the market." And he said, "Let me think about it, and I'll have Michael Cohen call you back in a few days."
Okay, I'm going to come back to that conversation that you had with Donald Trump. But I want to go back to something you said before, which is you said that you dispatched Dylan Howard to go interview Ms. McDougal.
Yes.
Where did you dispatch Dylan Howard to go?
He went to Los Angeles. He went to his source, who is this attorney. His name is Keith Davidson. He was representing this Playboy model. And he interviewed Dylan Howard interviewed Karen for 2 to 3 hours.
Did you personally attend that meeting?
No, I did not.
Did Michael Cohen?
No, he did not.
Did you speak with Michael Cohen during Mr. Howard's interview of Ms. McDougal?
I told Michael that during it was a 2-week period of time. I told him if I had the date correctly, I think it was June 20th that Dylan was going out to sit down and do the interview, and that he would call us when he was there. So by the time when I first discussed this with Michael Cohen, and to the time that Dylan actually went to California, I had multiple calls every single day. When is he going? When is he going to know? Is it done yet? It was all of these various different questions, and I said, just relax and wait until Dylan has the interview, and I'll call you as soon as I know.
I keep coming back to your pronouns because I want to make sure I know who you're talking about. Who did you have these multiple calls with? Who kept calling you and asking you about this?
I'm sorry. Michael Cohen kept calling me and asking me.
You said that the interview that Dylan Howard conducted with Karen McDougal was in Los Angeles on January 20th. Is that right?
Yes.
Did you speak with Michael Cohen on that day during the time that Ms. McDougal was being interviewed by Dylan?
Yes. Michael called me to find out if I heard from Dylan yet. I said, no. I said, when I hear from him, I'll set up a call for the three of us, and Dylan can tell you exactly what he's going to tell me.
How would you describe Michael Cohen's tone during those calls?
Michael was very agitated. It looked like he was getting a lot of pressure to get the answer, like, right away.
What makes you say that?
He kept on calling, and each time he called, he seemed more anxious.
Did you understand? Did you have an understanding as to where that pressure to find out more was coming from?
Well, I assumed that he had the conversation with Mr. Trump, and Mr. Trump was asking Michael Cohen, did we hear anything yet? This is only a theory on my part. I did not speak to Mr. Trump.
Not until you were in New Jersey and you got that call?
That's correct.
Is this a good time to break?
I think it's probably a good time to break.
Okay, very good. Get the witness, please.
Witness entering. The witness, David Pecker, enters the courtroom and resumes the witness stand. Step this way, please.
Okay. Good morning, Judge.
Good morning, Mr. Pecker. Welcome back.
Thank you.
I remind you, sir, that you are still under oath.
Yes, thank you.
Please get the jury.
All rise. Jury entering. Jury enters.
Please be seated.
Continuing case on trial, the People versus Donald J. Trump. All parties and all jurors are present.
Good morning, jurors. Welcome back. Mr. Steinglass.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Pecker.
Good morning.
When we left off, we were talking about June 20th when Mr. Howard was out in California interviewing Ms. McDougal. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
After Dylan Howard concluded his interview with Karen McDougal, did you and he speak?
Yes, we did.
And what did he tell you?
He described to me who Karen McDougal was. He repeated again that she was a Playboy model. She claimed that she had a year-long relationship with Donald Trump, a sexual relationship. She claimed he said that she was, and he said that she was a 12 out of 10, and then he said that he believed the story was true, but she had no corroborating evidence. He said to me that she didn't have anything BlackBerry. She didn't have any photos. She didn't have any expense reports that she went to Mar-a-Lago and Trump Tower. But he believed the story was true. 47 years old. Could be true. Or on her, she claimed that he went on to say that he offered her and her representative $10,000 to buy the story, and it was refused.
Did you ever have a three-way call that day with Dylan Howard and Michael Cohen?
Yes, I did.
How did that come about?
Michael Cohen was constantly calling me while Dylan Howard was in this meeting interviewing Karen McDougal. And I told Michael that as soon as I hear from Dylan, I will set up a three-way call.
And did that three-way call actually happen?
Yes, it did. Michael Cohen told me to make sure that I use Signal. So I set up the Signal call between myself, Michael Cohen, and Dylan Howard.
And tell us about that conversation, please.
Dylan described exactly what I just mentioned about who Karen McDougal was, and all of the details that I just stated. And immediately Michael Cohen said it's not true, which is something that he always said. And then he said, let me check it out, and I will come back to you.
Was there any discussion on that three-way call about acquiring the rights to Karen McDougal's story?
I think that we're talking about People's Exhibit 161, which is an invoice that was offered through Mr. Becker's testimony on Tuesday. It's an invoice indicating from Investor Advisory Services, and the issue that we have with that particular exhibit.
And did he say why he wanted you to try to buy the story?
Well, first he said the story wasn't true. Then he said that he thought that having that story out and I should add on, Dylan mentioned that ABC was interested in acquiring the story. He also mentioned that a Mexican group made an offer for the story for $8 million. Michael and I both said that although we didn't believe that there was a Mexican group that was going to buy the story, the ABC offer was interesting because they were offering apparently Karen a slot on Dancing with the Stars. But I knew from my experience that ABC doesn't buy stories, so I didn't think they were paying cash for the story. Dylan, also mentioned that Karen McDougal said that she didn't want her story to be published. She said she didn't want to be the next Monica Lewinsky. She said that she wanted to restart her career. He said that this is Dylan. Dylan said that she was apparently originally a fitness model, and she was the first female model on one of the covers of one of my magazines, for one of American Media's magazines, which was Men's Fitness. This was on a cover in 1999, so he felt that she would be more interested in coming in having American Media buying the story than anyone else.
And when you say he in that sentence?
I'm sorry. I meant Michael Cohen, excuse me. I meant Dylan Howard.
Thank you. And TP, the extent it's possible, if you could remember, it's better to use names than pronouns, so we don't have to run into that issue.
Okay, I'll do that.
If you can remember, how did your withdrawn? What was your initial thought after that three-way call about how to handle the Karen McDougal situation?
I thought we would have to buy that story. I believed exactly what Dylan said. He knows this marketplace. He's the chief content officer for the company. Karen McDougal's attorney was Keith Davidson, and Keith Davidson was one of the major sources for Dylan Howard. So I felt that this story should be purchased.
Now, I think you started to allude to, the end of the day on Tuesday, a conversation that you had with Donald Trump himself about this. Do you remember that?
Yes.
So my first question is, do you remember when that conversation with Donald Trump happened?
It was the third week of June of 2016.
So sometime was it after Dylan Howard had gone out to interview Karen McDougal on June 20th?
Yes.
And after the three-way call that you had with Michael Cohen and Dylan Howard?
Yes, that's correct.
Where were you when you got this call from Donald Trump? I in In Yester's Eye, one of my largest In Yester's meeting in New Jersey. And how did the call come in?
Oh, I was making a presentation and an update on our business, and the assistant in the office came into the conference room and said, "There is a call for you from Donald Trump." And I left and took the call.
And could you tell us about the conversation you had that day with Donald Trump?
Yes. When I got on the phone, Mr. Trump said to me, "I spoke to Michael. Karen is a nice girl. Is it true that a Mexican group is looking to buy her story for $8 million? I said, "I absolutely don't believe that there is a Mexican group out there to buy a story for $8 million. And then he said, "What do you think I should do?" I said, "I think you should buy the story and take it off the market."
So when the subject of Karen McDougal came up, Donald Trump described her as a nice girl?
Yes.
Based on your conversation with Mr. Trump, did you have an understanding as to whether he was aware of the specifics of Karen McDougal's description of the affair?
Yes, I did.
What made you come to such an understanding?
I think that Michael Cohen gave him the spoke to Donald Trump, which he said he was going to which Donald Trump said on the phone that, "I spoke to Michael." And I believe that when Mr. Trump said that to me over the phone that she was a nice girl, I believe that he knew who she was.
Why would you recommend to Donald Trump purchasing the story?
I believe the story was true. I think that it would have been very embarrassing to himself and also to his campaign.
After your conversation with Donald Trump, did you have another conversation with Michael Cohen?
Yes. On the conversation with Donald Trump, he said to me clearly that he doesn't buy stories because it always gets out. And he said to me that Michael Cohen would be calling me. He was going to speak to Michael, and he would be calling me back.
Now, you used a pronoun there?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry about that.
When you said he in that last answer, were you referring to Donald Trump?
Yes, I was. I'm sorry.
It's okay. So did there come a time when Michael Cohen followed up with you?
Yes. He called me that day or the next day.
Tell us about that conversation.
He called me, and he said you should go ahead and buy this story. So I said to him, I'm going to have Dylan Howard negotiate the terms. And then I said, who's going to pay for it? So he said to me, don't worry, I'm your friend. The boss will take care of it.
Who did you understand the boss to be a reference to?
Donald Trump.
When Michael Cohen said, the boss will take care of it, what did you understand that to mean?
That I would be either reimbursed by the Trump Organization or by Donald Trump.
Now, did Mr. Cohen say anything to you on that follow-up call one way or the other that led you to believe that he was aware of your conversation that you had had with Donald Trump when you were with your investor in New Jersey?
Yes. He told me that he was sitting in Donald Trump's office when he called me. I don't know if he was on speakerphone or not, but he said that he was there and he heard.
Did he tell you one way or the other whether he was able to overhear your conversation with Donald Trump?
Yes, he did.
What did he say about that?
He said that, I heard what you said to the boss, and I want you to go forward and negotiate the purchase of the story.
And did he give you Donald Trump's view on that question of whether to go forward to buy the story?
He just said to go forward to buy the story.
Did the topic of the $30,000 that you had already laid out on the Dino Sajudin story come up during that conversation with Michael Cohen?
At that conversation, we didn't have what the purchase price was going to be for the Karen McDougal story as of yet.
Okay.
If I can add.
Sure.
From that conversation, I was authorized basically to go forward and have Dylan Howard negotiate the price and negotiate the terms.
And did you in fact ask Dylan to go forward and negotiate the terms?
I did.
Now, you told us that Michael Cohen told you that the boss would take care of it, would pay you back. How did you feel about Michael Cohen's representation that Mr. Trump would reimburse you?
Over the years that I know that I worked with Michael Cohen, I know he didn't have any authorization to spend or to disperse any funds from the Trump Organization. Every time that we went even out for lunch, I always paid. He never paid. So I didn't think that he had any authorization to buy or acquire or spend any monies.
Without Mr. Trump's approval?
Without Mr. Trump's approval. I'm sorry.
During the time withdrawn, you told us that you gave Dylan Howard the authority to go ahead and negotiate a deal with Karen McDougal. Is that right?
That's correct.
Was Dylan Howard giving you periodic updates during those negotiations?
Yes, he did.
And did there come a time when you discussed with Dylan Howard some of the terms of the potential deal?
Yes.
What were some of the terms?
Dylan Howard gave me the following terms. To purchase the lifetime rights from Karen McDougal was going to cost $150,000. Plus, Karen wanted to restart her career. She wanted to write for the celebrity magazines. She wanted to be on the cover of some of the health and fitness titles. She had a major problem when her breast implants were removed, and she wanted to write some articles about that in Shape and in some of the other magazines. And she also wanted to launch a clothing line, a fitness clothing line, as well as a beauty product company, Beauty Products. And she wanted to let me she wanted to be an anchor for the red carpet events with Radar magazine.
Did you update Michael Cohen on the negotiations?
Yes, I did.
How often did you speak with Michael Cohen during the period when Dylan Howard was negotiating this deal with Karen McDougal?
We spoke very frequently, probably daily.
How would you describe his tone?
Michael was very agitated. Why is this taking so long? Why didn't we acquire? Why didn't we buy the story yet? Why didn't we finish the agreement? So he was pretty agitated.
Did you discuss with Michael Cohen the manner of who would be paying Karen McDougal?
Yes. Now that we had the price, that it was $150,000, I said, who is going to pay for this? So he said, you should pay. I said, Michael. I said, why would I pay? I just paid $30,000 for the doorman story. I said, now you're asking me to pay $150,000 for the Karen story, plus all of these other additional items that she wants to do. I don't have a problem in doing everything else that she requested about writing for the magazines, to be on the cover of the books of the fitness titles. That's not an issue, that I don't have a problem with. The $150,000, who is going to reimburse me for this. So he said again, don't worry about it. I'm your friend. The boss will take care of it.
And again, not to beat a dead horse, but when Michael Cohen told you, don't worry, the boss will take care of it, what did you understand that to mean?
The boss would have been Donald Trump.
And take care of it means what?
That I would be reimbursed either from the Trump Organization or from Donald Trump.
Okay. I am now going to display to everyone what's in evidence as People's Exhibit 173. You can start with page 1, displayed. Is this a series of texts between you and Dylan Howard from 2016 regarding Karen McDougal?
Yes, it is.
And I should just clarify, are portions of phone numbers and email addresses redacted in this exit to protect personal information of the parties to this text chain?
No response.
Did you understand my question?
Can you repeat it? I'm sorry.
Yeah, of course. My question was, are portions of the phone numbers and email addresses redacted on this exhibit to protect personal information of the parties to this text chain?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so I want to zoom in on the last column of the lines marked Doc 47, 240 to 241. Let me first ask you, is this last column basically a summary of the date, the time of the text, who it's from, who it's to, as well as the body of the text itself?
Yes, it is.
If you look, what does the date and time marked say on this top text?
July 23, 2016, 19 hours, 21 minutes, and 45 seconds, etc.
Now, do you understand that to mean July 23rd, 2016 at 7:21 p.m. UTC time?
Yes.
Do you know what UTC time is?
UTC time is 4 to 5 hours ahead of Eastern Standard Time, depending on what season it is.
Okay, so UTC time is 4 or 5 hours ahead of New York time?
New York.
Depending on whether it's daylight savings or not?
Yes.
Got it. In July of 2016, was the East Coast, observing Eastern Standard Time or Eastern Daylight Time in July?
I'm not sure.
Okay, let me ask it a different way. Was his daylight savings time in effect in the summer?
In the summer? Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so is it your understanding that during daylight savings time, New York time was 4 hours behind UTC, but then when you fall back in the fall and for the winter, New York time is 5 hours behind?
That's correct.
Okay, so does this exhibit contain the exact copy of text messages that you and Dylan Howard sent to each other on July 23rd, 2016?
Yes, it is.
And does the substances of these messages appear on your cell phone exactly as they do on this exhibit?
Yes, they do.
Has the substance of any of these text messages been altered in any way?
No, they have not.
Okay, so let's start with the first text, that is 7:21 p.m. UTC, which I guess is through no. Just a second. I'm sorry, I don't like to do math on the spot. 3:21 p.m. New York time?
New York time.
Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, can you read us the substance of that text? Oh, I'm sorry, one more thing. Who is the text from?
It's from Dylan Howard.
Okay, and who is it to?
It's to me.
Okay, and can you read us the substance of the text, please?
Spoke to Michael Cohen about that other issue. Obviously concerned that it is proceeding with filming dates, etc., and wants me to handle. I'm on it.
What did you understand Dylan Howard to be referring to when he said that other issue?
I don't recollect. Can you clarify that?
Well, I can't testify.
No.
But why don't we move on and see if the context will help you answer this question?
Okay.
And just while we're here, we have this displayed. What was your response to Dylan Howard on July 23rd?
I said, good move and follow up.
And as you sit here, Mr. Pecker, do you recall whether a contract was signed at some point with Karen McDougal?
Yes, it would have been signed the first week of August of 2016.
Okay, so did you have any concerns about the legality of AMI paying to kill a story regarding a political candidate?
Yes, I did.
Why did you have those concerns?
Between 2002 and 2003, I had an issue when I acquired a story for Arnold Schwarzenegger, when he was running for governor of California.
Can you explain a little bit more about that to the jury, please?
Yes, in 2002, the Wider magazines, which was Shape, Muscle and Fitness, Flex, Health and Fitness titles, were up for sale. Joe Wider was the founder. He founded all of those magazines. He also discovered Arnold Schwarzenegger, and those guys. I should say that Joe Wider and Arnold Schwarzenegger had a relationship for 50 years. So when the magazines were being sold, and I went to see Joe Wider right before the sale, he said to me, "Before we finalize this transaction, you have to meet with Arnold Schwarzenegger." So he gave me his phone number. I called up Schwarzenegger. I went to see him, and he had the following conversation with me. He said that, I have been on the covers of Muscle Fitness and Flex, two of the primary magazines you are buying, 70 to 80 times. He said, want to be an editor-at-large for both magazines. And I want an agreement. And he said, you bought the tabloids. He's referring primarily to the Globe and the National Enquirer. And he said, and as I mentioned, I think on Monday, we acquired them in March of 1999. He said that, I've had a number of litigation and lawsuits against both magazines because you always run negative stories about me. And he said, I plan on running for governor, and I would like for you not to publish any negative stories on me now. I should say, any negative stories about me now or in the future, and I will continue on being the editor for Muscle Fitness and Flex as the spokesperson. So I agreed. And shortly after, he announced on the Jay Leno show that he was running for governor. And a number after he made that announcement, a number of women called up the National Enquirer about stories that they have, I should say, to sell on different relationships or contacts and sexual harassment that they felt that Arnold Schwarzenegger did. And the deal that I had, the agreement I should say that I had with Arnold, is that I would call him and advise him of any stories that were out there. And I ended up buying them for a period of time. And then as he became governor and one of the stories that I acquired, I wasn't going to publish. And the person who took that story, and since we didn't publish it, she brought it to the Los Angeles Times, and the LA Times published the story. It was very embarrassing. Most of the press approached Arnold Schwarzenegger when he was governor about this story, and his comment was, I didn't know. He said, ask my friend David Pecker. So it was very embarrassing to me and the company, and by that time there was an investigation by the state with respect to Arnold being the editor of Editor-at-Large for these two titles. He had to resign, and it was a difficult situation, and it gave me the sensitivity about buying any stories in the future. So that's how I became sensitive on this topic.
So, let me just ask you one more question about the end of what you were just saying. Did, as a result of your agreement to purchase stories, negative stories about Arnold Schwarzenegger, on behalf of Arnold Schwarzenegger when he was running for governor of California, did you come to appreciate the legalities surrounding such an arrangement with a political candidate?
Yes. That was the first time I ever came across a political violation, a political contribution, what a violation was.
And what, if any?
Judge, I object to the word violation and move to strike.
Sustained.
What did you, in your mind, take away from that experience that you had as a result of the Arnold Schwarzenegger situation?
Based on what happened 14 years ago, I wanted to be comfortable that the agreement that we were going to prepare for Karen McDougal met all the obligations with respect to a campaign contribution.
Now, you told us that there was withdrawn. Did there come a time, and I don't want to get into what you discussed with any attorney?
Yep.
But did there come a time that someone AMI consulted with an election law attorney?
Yes.
And did there come a time that you finalized a deal with Karen McDougal?
Yes.
Did you tell Michael Cohen that you had finalized a deal with Karen McDougal?
Yes. I called Michael Cohen and I told him that we finalized the agreement with Karen McDougal, that the contract was bulletproof, and we consulted with a campaign attorney.
And to your knowledge, what did the campaign attorney review?
The agreement.
And the contract?
I'm sorry, the contract.
And was that all the campaign attorney reviewed as far as you know?
As far as I know, yes.
And do you recall how much time was billed for that review?
The dollars were, I don't remember the exact dollars, but they were small amounts of money.
Directing your attention to People's Exhibit 156, which is in evidence, I'm going to ask you if you recognize this document.
Yes.
What is it?
This is the Karen McDougal contract.
This is in evidence so we can display it to everyone. Thank you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I am sorry. I said that this is Karen McDougal's agreement.
What was the effective date of the agreement?
August 5th, 2016.
And I'm going to ask that paragraphs 1 and 2 be blown up. I'm not going to ask you to read this entire thing, but can you just give us some of the highlights of what the deal involved?
Yes, it was a 2-year agreement, and McDougal was going to get a monthly column on aging and fitness for Star Magazine, a monthly column on aging and fitness in OK Magazine. She was going to post on aging and fitness on Radar. AMI was going to hire ghostwriters. Ghostwriter is someone who would write the article for them, and then Karen McDougal would approve it, and which was an important point. And that any time Karen's photo was used in any digital site or in the magazine, she had to have approval of her image.
Okay, so now I'm going to blow up paragraph 3. We'll just ask you to read it to yourself, and I will highlight a little portion of it in the middle.
Yes.
You don't have to read the whole thing to the jury. It's in evidence.
Okay.
But I just want to ask you, I'm directing your attention to the highlighted portion.
I see it.
What did you understand this paragraph to mean, and what did you understand specifically the highlighted portion to be referring to?
This paragraph and the highlights here are specifically is referencing that we were acquiring her rights for her story on the relationship that she had with any married man.
And who did you understand the any then married man to be referring to?
That she was referring to Donald Trump.
So what does it mean to acquire someone's limited life rights? Can you explain that to the jury?
Yes. It means that you buy the rights for this specific story, and it cannot be published by any other publishing company. You cannot discuss it with any other media, and that it was exclusively owned by American media.
So would you describe this paragraph as the true purpose of this agreement?
Yes.
So why include that other stuff about the articles that she was going to have a ghostwriter for, and the covers that she was going to appear in front of? Why include that stuff?
I wanted to substantiate the $150,000 payment.
What do you mean, substantiate?
With respect to campaign laws, I wanted to have the contract be a record that stipulates that, for the services that she was going to perform for American media has a basis for it, for the $150,000. So when we talked about in the previous paragraph all of the articles she was going to run, the photos that she was going to do for the magazines, the posts that she was going to write, I was looking at an amount of money that I would have to acquire or pay for, freelancers or other writers or reporters or digital people, and that was to validate, to come up with the $150,000.
So was it your primary purpose in entering into this deal to buy the life rights?
Yes, it was.
Were the other provisions about the columns placed there to disguise the true nature of this contract?
Yes, it was. So I want to show you paragraph 4.
This one is short. Maybe you could just read it.
Yes. In connection with all the rights granted herein to AMI by McDougal, AMI shall pay McDougal the sum of $150,000 payable within 2 business days following the execution of this agreement.
So this was the price?
Yes.
Okay, I want to display page 2, paragraph 6. Can you read this to the jury and tell us what it means, please?
All decisions whatsoever, whether of a creative or business nature, regarding any of the rights granted by McDougal to AMI herein, or any rights derived or ancillary thereto, shall be made by AMI in its sole discretion.
Can you explain to us what that means?
That means that AMI would make the decision whether we would publish any story on Karen McDougal.
So by purchasing her life rights, you were not obligated to actually print them?
No.
Did you have any intention of printing them?
No, we did not.
Paragraph 7. Can you read that paragraph to yourself and tell us what it means?
All right. This paragraph clearly states that American media has sole rights for McDougal's story, and she is not allowed under any circumstances to write her own book, post to post anything on any digital site, and not to give any interviews. So we wanted, as American media, we wanted to control anything to do with this with respect to the $150,000 that we are paying for a story, and if she breached it, she would have to pay the money back.
So this paragraph basically meant that Karen McDougal was not allowed to take her story anywhere else?
That is correct.
And if she did, she had to return the entire $150,000?
That's right.
Even though she was still doing the columns and magazine covers?
Yes.
Okay, I am going to turn to page 3 and just ask you, can we blow up the very bottom? Did Karen McDougal sign this agreement?
Yes.
And who, if anyone, signed the agreement on behalf of AMI?
Dylan Howard. Do you recognize his signature? The signature, and he also put down Chief Content Officer.
And I, the time, August 5th, August 6th, 2016, Dylan Howard was the Chief Content Officer of AMI?
Yes, he had authorization to sign this agreement.
To your knowledge, who was aware of this agreement in AMI?
Objection.
If you know.
It would be other than myself. It would be obviously Dylan Howard and Cameron Straker, General Counsel.
And who was aware of this agreement on the Trump side, to your knowledge?
Objection.
Again, if you know.
You can answer.
Michael Cohen.
What about Mr. Trump himself?
Objection to leading.
Sustained.
Do you know whether anyone else besides Michael Cohen had knowledge of this contract?
Objection asked and once answered.
Overruled. You can answer.
Okay. Can you repeat that question again?
Probably not. Can you read it back, maybe, please?
Do you well if you know? Do you know whether anyone else besides Michael Cohen had knowledge of this contract?
Yes, I think Donald Trump did.
During your time as CHO of AMI, were you familiar with AMI's accounting practices, including the general ledger?
Yes.
Very briefly, can you tell the jury what it is, a general ledger?
All of the financial disbursements, the receivables, all of the monies that are transacted because the company is recording the entries in the general ledger or revenues or expenses.
As part of the accounting process, did AMI retain copies of invoices sent to AMI for payment?
Yes, they were.
I am showing you People's 158 in evidence, and I am going to ask you if you recognize this. It's in evidence, so we can display it to everyone.
Yes.
What is it?
This is an invoice from Keith Davidson and Associates, which is Karen McDougal's attorney, for the purchase of the lifetime rights for $150,000.
So I am just going to ask to blow it up. Thank you. And I will ask you, who is the payer or the subsidiary on this invoice?
It's AMI, American Media.
And that means you are the one being billed?
Yes, the invoice is coming to American Media.
And who is the vendor, and what does vendor mean?
Vendor is the accounts payable for services for the contracts that we purchased, and Keith Davidson is Karen McDougal's attorney.
So, in layman's terms, this is a bill from Keith Davidson to AMI?
It's a bill from Keith Davidson to AMI for Karen's lifetime rights, and we sent a wire transfer, $150,000, to his escrow account.
We will get to that in 1 minute. What's the invoice date?
August 9th, 2016, which is 2 days, 4 days from the date they signed, that we had the signed agreement.
With the effective date?
Yes, the effective date.
What's the invoice amount?
$150,000.
Okay, I am going to move down this exhibit a little bit and just ask you, what is the account?
The account is where it would be coded in the general ledger. This would be coded to the general administrator, on, and it says outside services. And the outside services, we take it one more. This is the president's department.
So, is it fair to say that this line that we have blown up has the account information, etc.? That's AMI's internal record keeping of how they are kind of recording this expense in their own books?
That's correct.
Why was this amount coded to the president's department?
From a budgetary standpoint, the editor's budget is very limited. As I previously mentioned the other day, they can spend no more than $10,000 on their own. This is a very, very large purchase. And from the budgetary standpoint, I budget in the president's account an overall number budget that during the year, if there are great photos to buy, something unusual, unique, the president's budget has the expense for it.
And incidentally, is that the same way you accounted for payment to Dino Sajudin?
Yes, it was.
So getting back to this, did AMI in fact pay the $150,000 for Karen McDougal's lifetime rights?
Yes, we did.
I believe you said you accomplished that by a wire transfer?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to show you People's Exhibit 159 in evidence. Briefly for the jury, what is this?
This is the general ledger detail for this transaction.
And when you say the general ledger detail, you are talking about AMI's general ledger detail?
Yes, American Media's general ledger detail of this transaction.
I will just ask to blow it up a little bit. It's still very small. Does it contain a department that this is being billed to?
Yes, it says President's Department.
And does it also contain the vendor's name?
Yes, it does.
And so you record Keith Davidson into the general ledger books, IAMI?
Yes.
It includes the amount of the payment?
Yes.
And the date of the payment?
That's correct.
And what was the date of the payme?
The date of the payment is...
Would you need to look at another document to determine that?
Oh, I am sorry. Date of payment was I was just checking. It was August 9th.
Do you know if that's the date of the invoice or the date of the payment, or are you not sure?
That I am not sure.
Okay, let's just take a look. I exhibit 160 also in evidence. I'm going to ask you first. Do you recognize this?
Yes, this is a payment voucher.
Briefly for the jury, what is a payment voucher?
A payment voucher is when all of the documents for a payment are approved. The invoice, the contracts are prepared. The contract was approved. The invoice from Keith Davidson was approved for over $150,000. The next step would be to create a payment voucher so you can actually wire a check.
Okay, who is the payee listed here? Keith Davidson and Associates. And again, what is the amount billed?
$150,000.
Date of the bill?
8/9, August 9th.
The date of the payment?
The date of the payment would have been August 10th.
That's 2016?
2016.
Turning your attention to page 2 of the same document, do you know what this is?
Yes.
What is it?
Yes. It's to actually disperse a check. You create a payment voucher, payment request, and the payment request here is $450,000 to Keith Davidson and Associates, and it was approved by Chris Polimeni, who is the Chief Financial Officer of American Media.
Dust, to clarify for the record, did you say that it was $450,000 or for $150,000?
It was $150,000. It was for $150,000.
You have to...
It's $150,000.
Thank you. Now, I am not going to walk you through every entry on this page. Does it contain the statement account code and the same department code as the general ledger?
Yes, it does.
And finally, does this appear to be a sticker at the top that says high priority?
Yes.
Do you know who placed that sticker up there?
Normally it would be Liz Rutolo. It's Chris Polimeni's assistant and also the accounts payable clerk.
Okay, you can take that down. Thank you. Did you ever have any intention of printing Karen McDougal's story about her affair with Mr. Trump?
No, we never did. No, we did not.
Was your principal purpose in entering into the agreement with Karen McDougal to suppress her story as to prevent it from influencing the election?
Yes, it was.
As of 2016, were you aware that corporations, including AMI, are subject to federal campaign finance laws?
Yes, I was.
Were you aware that expenditures by corporations made for the purpose of influencing an election made in coordination with or the request of a candidate are unlawful?
Objection.
Grounds.
May I be heard?
Sure.
Discussion is held. I sidebar on the record.
My objection is right now there is a ruling in place, and that limits the extent to which we can put on expert testimony to explain these concepts. So I think these questions, if they are permitted, are opening the door to a lot more explanation. I think we are on the precipice of that right now.
Judge, first of all, the law is the law. That's a basis of our motions in limine. I don't think that we are opening the door to any kind of expert testimony on the law. But anyway, the more important thing here is that this witness's understanding of whether his own conduct violated the law is highly relevant. I don't think it opens the door.
I agree. He's not asked to provide the law. He is asked if he has awareness of the law.
I think he was asked, were you aware that there was a law that did the following, and we disagree that the law did the following? Did you think what you were doing was illegal?
I'm going to allow it.
We dispute that that's the law, Your Honor.
Discussion of sidebar concluded, and the following occurred in open court.
Objection is overruled.
Do you remember the question?
I would have to ask you to repeat it again.
Were you aware that expenditures by corporations made for the purpose of influencing an election, made in coordination with or the request of a candidate or a campaign, are unlawful?
Yes.
Did either you or AMI ever report to the Federal Election Commission in 2016 that AMI had made a $150,000 payment to Karen McDougal?
No, we did AOT.
Why did AMI make this purchase of Karen McDougal's story?
We purchased the story so it wouldn't be published by any other organization.
And why did you not want it to be published by any other organization? We didn't want the story to embarrass Mr. Trump or embarrass or hurt the campaign. When you say we, who is we?
Myself and Michael Cohen.
But for Mr. Cohen's promise to reimburse AMI withdrawn. But for Mr. Cohen's promise that Mr. Trump would reimburse AMI, would you have entered into this agreement?
No.
Now, did you have any discussions with anyone in the Trump camp about Donald Trump reimbursing AMI for the money paid to Karen McDougal?
I had conversations with Michael Cohen.
Did those conversations continue after AMI actually laid out the money?
Yes.
How? Tell us about some of those conversations.
When we signed the contract, and after I paid after the American media made the disbursement which we just saw on August 10th, I asked Michael Cohen on a number of occasions how the company would be reimbursed. The issue that the company has is that September 30th is the end of a quarter, and I wanted we always reflect the proper true-ups of all of the various different accounts. And I wanted to make sure that the funds were back, and the accounts were properly stated in the quarterly financial statements.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that? What do you mean true up?
The records. True up the records. Normally, most companies just only speak about our own, and when a payment or a disbursement is made, it is usually put into an expense account, and then, after the payment was made, and it is put in the president's account. And then the end of a quarter here, we were planning that the $150,000 would be recovered, and the actual expense would be reported as editorial expenses or other services depending on this. But here the money was recovered. The expense would not be recorded all in the books, other than the articles and the other services that Karen was going to be providing that had billed dollars behind them.
So I don't want to...
If I could clarify a little bit more.
Sure.
So, what I am saying is, that is where I kept on discussing this with Michael Cohen. I wanted to explain to him why it was so important to get to be reimbursed, and we had a number of conversations the end of August, September. And he basically said, the end of each conversation, why are you worried? I am your friend. The boss will take care of it.
Was there ever any discussion withdrawn? You said you had a lot of conversations with Michael Cohen in August and September. Was there any conversation about candidate Trump actually acquiring Ms. McDougal's lifetime rights from AMI?
Yes. In September, Michael Cohen said that Mr. Trump wants to acquire the lifetime rights of the Karen McDougal story, and I should assign the contract over to him. When I say over to Michael Cohen and I would be reimbursed, the company would be reimbursed. And he also added on that Mr. Trump wanted all of the content that the National Enquirer had or developed and retained on Mr. Trump. I told Michael that, these are old files and boxes that are in Florida. The company has been moved to New York City, and there is nothing in those boxes but old news articles, magazine articles, old files. He insisted that he wanted those boxes, and he wanted the content. And Michael Cohen called me constantly in the month of September to review and to send those boxes to his office.
Did Michael Cohen say why Mr. Trump wanted those boxes and why he wanted the rights to Karen McDougal's story?
Yes. He said that the boss said that if I got hit by a bus or if the company was sold, he did not want someone else to potentially publish those stories.
And now in terms of selling the rights to Ms. McDougal's story to Mr. Trump, did you have one or several conversations with Michael Cohen about that?
We had several conversations.
Did there come a time when you communicated to Michael Cohen a willingness to sell Mr. Trump the rights to Karen McDougal's story, the lifetime rights?
Yes.
Tell us about that. I told Michael Cohen that I would sign the rights over to, I would sign the rights, and he asked me, it's $150,000? I said, look, Karen is going to be writing for the various magazines and visual sites. She's going to appear on a couple of covers of the magazines. I value that $25,000. So I will retain $25,000 as editorial expenses, and I will bill you for the lifetime rights for $125,000. So, did you value the portion of the contract, the $150,000 you had paid to that AMI had paid to Karen McDougal? Did you value the lifetime rights $125,000?
Yes, I did.
And was that the price that you were willing to sell the lifetime rights to Michael Cohen on behalf of Donald Trump for?
Yes.
Did you discuss the timing of the assignment of rights?
Michael Cohen wanted the contract done yesterday, and this is going towards the end of September. So I facilitated to have the agreement, the assignment of the rights, sent over to him. I told Michael Cohen that we would have it done by the end of September, first week of October of 2016.
Did you see this as a way to recoup the money, or at least some of the money, that you had laid out on behalf of Mr. Trump to buy the story?
Yes, as I said, it was coming towards the end of the quarter, so I wanted to see if I could get the fund refunded before September 30th.
Was there an invoice prepared for this reimbursement?
Yes.
May we approach?
Sure.
Discussion is held. I sidebar on the record.
So, this is the one that I can probably go another half hour without getting into this. So, this is the one document that was referenced earlier that may come up in the next half hour. If I get through this document, I can get through the initial half without taking a break if you want. Last night, counsel told us that they did not want this line here, agreed upon a flat fee for advisory services to be offered for the truth. This morning they said they don't want it to come in all. We don't even think it's true. It is a bogus invoice. But now, it sounds like this morning they want it redacted, which we think is ridiculous.
I guess he thinks I am a worse guy than I am. When I said we didn't think it should come in for the truth, it is that we think it shouldn't come in all. My point is asking for the redactions is that this is, if it is not coming in for the truth, an assertion like that which is prejudicial shouldn't be in front of the jury.
Simple way to mitigate the prejudices is to redact it. That's all I meant.
The $125,000 for.
He just testified the $125,000 was the payment that was being billed to Michael Cohen to reimburse Mr. Pecker for the money that was laid out for Karen McDougal.
It wasn't for this?
It absolutely was not for this. This is a false business record. It's not only meant to discuss the true nature of the reimbursement.
If I could, I don't think Mr. Pecker is going to say he prepared this. Maybe he will. I think he's going to say Dan Rothstein, a consultant outside of AMI, not employed by AMI, prepared it, is not his statement.
He didn't have to prepare it. Does he know this document? Has he seen the document?
Yes, Daniel Rothstein worked part-time for AMI, and I think the witness laid the business record foundation.
I am going to allow it. Are you asking for a limiting instruction regarding the document?
Judge, we would ask just to make sure that a foundation is laid that Mr. Pecker saw this contemporaneously.
Sure.
Thank you.
Discussion with sidebar concluded, and the following occurred in open court.
So you told us, I believe, Mr. Pecker, that there was an invoice prepared for this reimbursement. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
I would like to show what is in evidence and is being displayed as People's Exhibit 161. Do you recognize this document?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
That is an invoice from Investment Advisory Services. This is not an American media company. This company is owned by a man by the name of Daniel Rothstein. Daniel Rothstein was the head of human resources and the head of administration for American media for probably close to 20 years. And he resided with the company, and he took a position as an executive in the Himalayas in Florida. I think it's in Plantation, and he was working there 4 days a week. Daniel Rothstein was a very valuable employee to me, and I wanted to keep the relationship. So I asked him if he would still continue to work for American media as a consultant. He did, performing these services and administration services. And what another aspect I asked him to do is, when I had large payments to be made on behalf of American media or something to be received, I requested that Daniel to handle it through his company. And the reason is that if I had anything, if there was a large disbursement within the American media finance department, they, the finance people, would tell the tabloid editors. For example, if we read that a private plane would fly a celebrity to one place, if we hired certain photographers, paparazzi photographers, I didn't want that type of communication to go through the company. So, to have them outside was much more beneficial. Part is that we had some pretty difficult experiences within the company whereby the payroll register for American media, the company based in Florida, was hidden upon each post, and the top executive's salary and compensation was listed right on the front page of the paper. So I had a number of incidents over the years, so I asked Daniel Rothstein to handle this for me. So I called him and said, look, I don't want to have a check from the Trump organization going through American media. I don't know exactly how it's going to be reimbursed. So I would like for you to speak to Michael Cohen directly and work out with him, whereby you bill him the invoice for $125,000 and reimburse American media. So I called Michael Cohen to tell him about that Daniel Rothstein would be handling this reimbursement, and I asked Daniel Rothstein to call Michael Cohen directly. I made the introduction. Michael told me that he created a company called Resolution Consultants that we should bill, and Daniel Rothstein prepared the agreement, the assignment, and the invoice.
I'm going to instruct the jury, Mr. Steinglass.
Sure.
Jurors, so this document has been accepted into evidence. I direct you to not consider this document for the truth of its contents. It is being accepted into evidence for the fact that this invoice was created, not for the truth of what it says.
Thank you, Judge. Let me ask you this. Is it fair to say that you asked Daniel Rothstein to be the middleman to disguise the fact that money would be flowing from Michael Cohen to AMI?
Objection.
Sustained. I am not trying to be offensive. Can you, Saint, give us a short answer about why you used Daniel Rothstein in the first place to create this invoice?
I used Daniel Rothstein to create the invoice because I did not want to have a payment received in the AMI finance department from the Trump organization or Michael Cohen.
Why not?
Because I believed that payment would raise a lot of questions and issues and be communicated to the rest of the editors, which is something I didn't want to happen.
Okay, so I'm going to blow up the top of this invoice, and I'm going to ask you a few questions about it. First of all, what is the date of this invoice?
September 21st, 16.
Who is being billed?
Resolution Consultants, LLC.
And I think you alluded to this a few minutes ago, but what was your understanding of the purpose of using Resolution Consultants to reimburse AMI for the Karen McDougal payment?
When I spoke to Michael Cohen, he said he was creating a company to receive the lifetime rights, and that would reimburse and pay the $125,000.
So you were using Investor Advisory Services, and Michael Cohen was using Resolution Consultants?
That's correct.
What is the description of services provided in this invoice?
Says, agreed upon flat fee for advisory services.
Was this invoice actually for advisory services?
No, it wasn't.
What was it really for?
This was for the lifetime rights of the Karen McDougal story.
Why did the invoice from Investor Advisory Services say, agreed upon flat fee for advisory services?
That comment was pulled from Michael Cohen. That's what he wanted the invoice to say.
Did you discuss with Michael Cohen the matter of where the money to reimburse you, where this $125,000 was going to be coming from?
I assumed it was coming. I shouldn't say that. I assumed he was being reimbursed. He was always being reimbursed.
By whom?
By the Trump Organization or Donald Trump.
Okay, I am showing you People's 162 in evidence. Do you recognize this?
Yes.
What is it?
This is an assignment from American media to Resolution Consultants, assigning the rights to the Karen McDougal story.
Are you familiar with the terms assignor and assignee?
Why did the invoice from Investor Advisory Services say, agreed upon flat fee for advisory services?
Can you explain to the jury what those terms mean, and who is the assigner and the assignee?
Well, the assigner, American media, owns the rights to the Karen McDougal story, and has the right to decide to assign it to anyone that they wanted to, and the assignee is the person who is receiving them. So, all of the rights that American media had are being passed on to Resolution Consultants.
Who signed on the behalf of the assignor, AMI?
That's my signature.
And you were the CEO?
And I am CEO.
And who signed on behalf of the assignee? Do you recognize that signature?
That is Michael Cohen.
And what was the date of the assignment of rights?
The 30th day, September 30th.
And is that the last day of AMI's fiscal quarter?
Yes.
Did you agree upon a price that Resolution Consultants would pay for the rights?
Yes, $125,000. Now, even though this agreement was signed, was it ever actually executed? No, it wasn't.
Now again, I'm going to ask you to be very careful here. Without revealing any privileged conversations with your legal counsels or general counsel, did you come to the decision? Did you have a conversation with your general counsel?
I did.
And based on that conversation, did you come to the decision that you no longer wanted to be reimbursed for the money that AMI had laid out to acquire Ms. McDougal's lifetime rights?
Yes, that's correct.
Did you communicate that decision to Michael Cohen?
Yes.
Do you know about when it was that you communicated that decision?
It was the first week of October.
Of 2016?
Yes, the first week of October of 2016.
Tell us about that conversation.
Yes. I called Michael Cohen, and I said to him that the assignment deal is off. I am not going forward. It is a bad idea, and I want you to rip up the agreement. He was very, very angry, very upset, screaming basically, And I said, I am not going forward agreement. Rip it up. And he said, excuse me. Michael Cohen said, the boss is going to be very angry at you. I said, I am sorry. I am not going forward. The deal is off. And he said, I can't believe it. I am a lawyer. I am your friend. I don't understand why you are so concerned. I said, I am very concerned, and I am not going forward, period. And I said, are you going to rip it up or not? And he said, I will take care of it.
To be clear, Mr. Pecker, did AMI ever get reimbursed for the money?
No.
Let me finish the question. Did AMI ever get reimbursed for the money it spent to acquire the exclusive rights to Ms. McDougal's story about her affair with Mr. Trump?
No, we never did.
I'm not sure how we are doing, but is this a good time for our morning break?
Okay, jurors, let's take our morning recess. We will take about 20 minutes or so.
Recess is taken. All rise, whereupon the jury exited the courtroom.
Please be seated. Witnesses excused. So there are a couple of things we would like to go over. Let's just take a short break. Let's come back in 5 or 10 minutes, and then we can get started.
Okay, thank you.
Short recess is taken. Witness entering courtroom.
Mr. Pecker, you remain under oath. Let's get the jury, please.
Thank you, Judge.
Jury entering courtroom. All rise.
Thank you. Please be seated.
Continuing case on trial. People versus Donald J. Trump. All parties are present.
Jurors, thank you for your patience. Mr. Steinglass.
Thank you. Hello again, Mr. Pecker.
Hi.
Before we move on, I want to ask you one more question. I'm going to ask to put up just for the witness and the attorneys and the judge Exhibit 169. You testified, I believe it was yesterday, that some point after the election, you released Dino Sajudin from the non-disclosure agreement that AMI had previously entered into with him?
That's right.
Do you remember what the date was that you released Dino Sajudin?
It was December 2016.
Do you remember the actual date?
It was the first week.
Take a look. The exhibit in front of you, see if it refreshes your recollection as to the date that Mr. Sajudin was released.
December 9th is the date of the email.
2016?
December 9th, 2016.
Thank you. I want to now direct your attention to October of 2016. Did you come to learn about a video and audio recording of then-candidate Donald Trump that was released by Access Hollywood?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury what was the gist of that recording?
The gist of T recording was a conversation between Donald Trump and Billy Bush, who was an anchor for Access Hollywood, going on a bus to a set, and the comments from Mr. Trump was, "You can grab a woman by the genitals," and it was under sexual comments that were made.
Was that tape released publicly?
Yes.
Do you recall what happened when that tape was released publicly?
Yes, I do. It was very embarrassing, very damaging to the campaign.
Do you remember the date on which that tape was released?
I remember it was the first week of October of 2016.
Okay, so you don't remember the actual date. It's okay if you don't.
I remember the 6th or 7th.
Of October?
Of October.
Okay. Did you recognize the voice doing most of the speaking on the Access Hollywood tape?
Yes.
Whose voice did you recognize it to be?
Donald Trump.
Shortly after the Access Hollywood tape was released, did you speak with Michael Cohen about Mr. Trump?
Yes, I did.
And can you tell the jury what was cussed during that conversation?
On that conversation, Michael Cohen told me that the tape, the feedback on the Access Hollywood tape, it was very, very damaging to the campaign, and everyone was very concerned. The campaign was very concerned about what impact it would have.
Did Michael Cohen ask you to do anything to help do damage control?
Specifically, I don't remember.
Are you familiar with an online publication called Radar Online?
Yes, that's our publication.
And did you have any conversation with Michael Cohen about a Radar Online article?
Yes. The Radar Online is a digital website. It was launched in late 2000, and American media acquired it during that period of time. And unbeknownst to me, Michael Cohen said that on that digital there is a posting of Donald Trump being a Playboy man, and I should immediately take it down. That Mr. Trump was very upset. I said to Michael I was unaware of this posting.
I'm going to show you what's in evidence as People's 167. I will show everyone, actually. And I'm going to ask you if you recognize this email.
Yes, I do.
What is it?
This is the email that after I spoke to Michael Cohen, I called up Dylan Howard, and I asked him about this Playboy Man article on Donald Trump, and he discovered that this was posted prior to our position. I was also unaware of it. He would take it down immediately. So I said to him, do that, notify Michael, remove the article, and notify Michael Cohen. The email that he sent here is explaining it to Michael about the story.
Okay, so this middle portion of the email that we have blown up, who sent this email?
Dylan Howard.
And who was it sent to?
To Michael Cohen.
And is anyone CC'd?
I was CC'd on it.
Can you read the body of the email, please?
It says, the only story that was posted in October of 2008, before AIM owned it, the old Radar magazine. The tape was not part of the story that existed online. I suggested it was lost during many of the site changes during the years. Nevertheless, I've deleted the story completely. It no longer exists.
What did you understand Dylan Howard to mean when he said, I've deleted the story completely, it no longer exists?
He was following my instructions to remove the posting from the Radar digital site.
And let me just show you the bottom portion of this email for a moment. Is this where it says, Donald Trump Playboy Man? Is that the posting that you understood Dylan Howard to be in the process of removing?
Yes.
What is the date on that Playboy Man article? Sorry, go back to the bottom portion for a moment.
Yes.
What is the date of the original article that was being removed?
October 27th, 2008.
Thank you. And now I would like to blow top portion of this email. Was this email also sent to anyone else?
Yes.
I should say this email chain?
Yes.
To whom was it sent?
It was sent to Hope Hicks.
When was that?
October 8th, 2016, at 8 p.m.
Thank you. By the way, Mr. Pecker, in all the years you have known Trump, have you ever known him to use email himself?
No.
Have you ever communicated with him by email?
Never.
How did you communicate with him?
By phone. Mostly by office phone.
Who did you go through when you communicated by office phone?
I would go through his administrative assistant, Rona Graff.
Okay, Mr. Pecker, do you know of someone named Stephanie Clifford?
Yes.
Do you know her by any other name?
Stormy Daniels.
Who is Stormy Daniels?
Stormy Daniels is or was a porn star.
Have you ever met her in person?
No, I never did.
Let me ask you in a different way.
Sure.
Did you communicate directly with Ms. Daniels ever?
I never did.
How did you come to learn of her in connection with this case?
I was having dinner with my wife, and I received an urgent call from Dylan Howard. So I walked out of the restaurant and took the call, and Dylan said that he received a call from his two best sources, Keith Davidson, who we know is the attorney for Karen McDougal, and this other source, Gina Rodriguez, who is an agent for those type of celebrities. He said that she, being Stormy Daniels, is trying to sell a story that she had a sexual relationship with Donald Trump, and Dylan can acquire the story for $120,000 from Keith Davidson if we make the decision right now.
Do you remember what night it was? You said, were you having dinner?
Yes.
Do you remember what night it was?
I thought it was a Saturday night. I know it was the first week of October.
You think it was a Saturday night before or after the Access Hollywood tape came out?
This would have been after the Access Hollywood came out.
If I pull up calendar on my phone from October of 2016, would that refresh your recollection as to what date it was?
Yes.
Does that refresh your recollection as to the date of the Saturday night that you had your dinner interrupted by Dylan Howard?
That would have been Saturday, October 8th.
Thank you. I will take it back.
I object. Technically, that answer is non-responsive. The question is, does that refresh your recollection?
I will allow it.
Now, after your initial conversation with Dylan Howard, did you have a series of texts back and forth with him?
Yes, I did.
I am showing you what is in evidence as People's 174A, and as we're pulling it up, we can show it to everyone, please. I'm going to ask if this is a record of texts between you and Dylan Howard from October and November of 2016.
That's correct.
And I'm going to ask that we blow up the last column or the lines marked 47.260 through 265. Are you able to read that, Mr. Pecker?
Yes, I can.
My first question is, what is the date and timestamp on the first text?
It's 2016, October 9th. The time is UTC time, so it would be, I remember it was about 10 o'clock I night. I am not sure how you calculate that.
Let's see if we can work together. 0025, is that 12:25 a.m. in UTC time?
Yes.
Now, I think you testified earlier that during daylight savings, UTC time is 4 hours ahead of New York time?
Yes.
If it's 12 a.m. UTC, does that correspond to 8 New York time?
Yes.
Where was it that you were having dinner with your wife? I don't want the restaurant, just the city.
In Greenwich, Connecticut.
Also New York time?
Yes.
Who is this text from?
Dylan Howard.
And who is the text to?
It was to me. Woman wants $120,000, has offers from the Mail and GMA. Want her to talk and do lie detector live. I know the denials were made in the past, but this story is true. I can lock it on publication now to shut down the media chatter, and we can access next steps thereafter, okay?
What did understand that text to mean in general?
That American media should buy the story for $120,000.
Who did you understand the woman to be referring to?
Based on the conversation I had over the phone with Dylan Howard, I knew it was Stormy Daniels.
And how did you respond to him in the next text?
I guess I should clarify, I said, we can't pay $120,000.
Is that second entry a response from you to Dylan Howard? I should have clarified that first.
Yes, when I spoke to him over the phone, I would like to add more to this.
Please.
When he called me, he mentioned about the story other than not paying $120,000. I said, I don't want the National Enquirer to be associated with a porn star. I said that our largest distributor, our largest retailer, Walmart, this would be very bad for the magazine, very damaging for American media. I don't want any affiliation with it at all. To call Michael Cohen.
Well withdrawn. So you told Dylan Howard that we can't pay $120,000, is that right?
That's correct.
Why did you say that?
I said, we already paid $30,000 to the doorman. We paid $150,000 to Karen McDougal, and I am not a bank. I am not paying out any further disbursements among us.
How, if at all, did Dylan Howard respond?
He said, okay, they need to handle it. Perhaps I should call Michael and advise him, and he could take it from there and handle it.
What did you understand they to be referring to?
Michael Cohen and Donald Trump.
And how did you respond to that?
I responded, I said, yes, a good idea.
Why did you think it was a good idea to kick this over to Michael Cohen?
I thought the story, the way Dylan described it, could be very damaging. I thought it should come off the market. If anyone was going to buy it, I thought Michael Cohen and Donald Trump should buy it.
To be clear here, Mr. Pecker, Mr. Howard came to you. Dylan Howard came to you after having been contacted by his sources, Keith Davidson and Gina Rodriguez?
That's right.
Objection.
Sustained.
How did you first learn of Stormy Daniels in this context?
From Dylan Howard.
And what did he tell you about where this information was coming from?
He said to me that it came from his two top sources, Keith Davidson and Gina Rodriguez. A, that they had reached cut to Dylan, said the Cohen. With you, O, you told a O, and that they had reached out.
Objection.
Did they reach out? To him, to Dylan Howard? Was it your understanding from speaking to Dylan Howard?
Yes.
Okay, what was the next text in the Howard exchange? First of all, who sent it to whom?
Dylan Howard sent the text to me, and he following. I spoke to MC. I spoke to Michael Cohen. All sorted, now removed, no fingerprints. We'll recap face to face.
So did you understand MC to be Michael Cohen, I think you told us?
Yes, that's correct.
What did you understand Dylan communicating to you when he said, all sorted, no fingerprints?
That American media would have no association with the story. There would be no conversations, no paperwork. He would not be involved in enabling the story to be purchased other than handing it to Michael Cohen. And the no fingerprints. There was no paper trail.
And how did you respond to that?
I said to him, great work.
Tam, sorry to ask you this. What does TX mean?
I am, thanks.
Around this time, in October of 2016, did you also have any conversations with Michael Cohen about Stormy Daniels?
Yes, also a number of conversations.
Can you tell the jury about some of those conversations?
Michael Cohen asked me to pay for the story, to purchase it. I said, I am not purchasing this story. I am not going to be involved with a porn star, and I am not, which I immediately said, a bank. After paying out the doorman and paying out Karen McDougal, we're not paying any more monies.
How did Michael Cohen take that?
He was upset. He said that the boss would be furious me, and that I should go forward in purchasing it. I said I am not going forward in purchasing it. I am not doing it. Period.
Do you know whether Michael Cohen was also speaking with Dylan Howard around this time?
I found out after that he was speaking to Dylan Howard, which I was not pleased about.
Why?
Because it was my understanding, what I instructed Dylan Howard to do, is to stay out of it, out of the story, out of the selling process.
How did you come to learn that Dylan Howard did not in fact follow those orders?
My office towards the end of October and said that there was an agreement between Keith Davidson and Michael Cohen. It was for $120,000. And Michael Cohen was supposed to wire the funds to Keith Davidson twice, and he never did. Dylan was upset. He was very agitated and said that Michael Cohen is going to make him look very bad with his two top sources. And he said, you understand when you renege with a source, what the impact would be. So he asked me if I would get Michael Cohen on the phone. I set up a signal call to Michael Cohen. So it was Michael Cohen, myself, and Dylan Howard. Dylan Howard was very aggressive with Michael Cohen on the phone for not paying. Michael Cohen said that I should pay. He said, David, you should pay. I said, I am not paying for this story. I didn't want to be involved in this in the beginning. I said, I am not doing it. I said, Michael, my suggestion to you, you should buy the story. You should take it off the market because if you don't, and it gets out, I believe the boss will be very angry with you.
Do you remember when that phone call took place?
I think it was like October 20th, towards the end of October.
Can we show the witness privately 302A, page 23?
In front of me.
Is this a record of an interview between yourself and the FBI?
Yes, it is.
Does it refresh your recollection as to the date that your three-way call with Michael Cohen and Dylan Howard took place?
No, I don't think it does.
Does it?
There is no date.
3028, page 5. You said you used the Signal app to make this call?
That's correct.
Why did you use the Signal app?
Michael Cohen requested that every time we have a conversation that I should use the Signal app. And the way he explained it to me, the call is deleted after a period of time, and it's encrypted. There are no messages.
So I am showing you another document. Do you recognize this document to be another record of an interview with you with the FBI?
Yes.
Do you know roughly what month and year that interview was conducted?
When the interview was conducted.
When the interview was conducted.
August 2018.
Does that refresh your recollection as to when the three-way conversation took place between yourself, Michael Cohen, and Dylan Howard?
Yes, it's around the 30th of October 2016.
Okay, and I will ask you to keep reading. Take a lock eye, the second paragraph in particular, and see whether it does or does not. Does that refresh your recollection with a little bit more precision on that date?
Yes, I remember. I said October 20th. I remember it was the end of October. Yes, that's correct. October 25th.
Does that refresh your recollection that the call took place on October 25th?
Yes.
I want to fast forward. Did there come a time around the same time when you got a call from Keith Schiller regarding a belief that Karen McDougal was going on ABC News?
Yes.
Remind us who Keith Schiller is.
Keith Schiller is Donald Trump's bodyguard.
And what did Keith Schiller tell you?
Objection.
Overruled.
Go ahead.
Keith said that the boss heard that Karen was speaking to ABC News.
How, if in any way, did you respond?
And I said, let me get back to you. I have not heard that Let me get back and check it out. And I called up Dylan Howard, and I asked Dylan. And Dylan called up Keith Davidson, and Keith Davidson told Dylan that is not true. And I called back Keith and told him that it is not true.
What is not true?
Dylan called me to tell me that he verified that Karen McDougal is not speaking to ABC. I called back Keith Schiller, and I asked him to relay that to the boss. What he heard is not true.
And what, if anything, did Keith Schiller say in response?
He responded back and said the boss was very pleased.
All right, so directing your attention to November.
Objection. Move to strike the last answer.
Sustained. What is the last question?
Directing your attention to November 4th, 2016, did you become aware that the Wall Street Journal published an article that day revealing aspects of the Karen McDougal's story?
Yes.
How did you become aware of that?
Our communications director from American Media received a number of calls from the Wall Street Journal and had a series of questions about Karen McDougal's agreement. That American Media purchased her story on her relationship with Donald Trump. And also they questioned my relationship with Donald Trump.
I'm going to show just the witness and the parties, please. Court Exhibit 180. I will ask you to take a look at this exhibit. Do you recognize it?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
This is the Wall Street Journal article that was published on November 4th.
The one you just mentioned that referred to the Karen McDougal story?
Referring to the Karen McDougal story.
I offer it into evidence.
No objection. Subject to the limiting instruction.
Again, jurors, it's not being admitted for the truth of the matters asserted, simply that it was proof that it was published on that date.
Whereupon exhibit was received in evidence.
If I could publish it to everyone now. I'm going to ask you, Mr. Pecker, the article revealed the fact that AMI had paid McDougal the rights to the story about the affair with Donald Trump?
Yes.
And did this article appear before or after the election?
This article appeared before the election.
Do you know what day Election Day was in 2016?
November 8th.
Did there come a time after this article came out that you spoke to then-candidate Trump?
Yes.
When was that?
November 5th.
November 5th of 2016?
It was the following day, November 5th, 2016.
And that's 3 days before Election Day?
Yes.
How did this call happen?
I received first a text from Michael Cohen saying that the boss wants to speak to me. Then Donald Trump called me. It was a Saturday. I was home. Donald Trump was very upset, saying, "How could this happen? I thought you had this under control. You, or one of your people have leaked the story." So I said, "Donald, there is no way on earth I would leak the story. And we, being American media, had the agreement only between a couple of people. So there is no way we would have given this information, or the information to the Wall Street Journal." I said, "The only other individual that had the agreement was Karen McDougal. So Karen McDougal, or her people, or someone from her staff or herself, gave it to the Wall Street Journal. Not us. I don't believe that Donald Trump believed it over the phone. He was very agitated. He couldn't understand how this could happen. Our call ended very abruptly.
What do you mean when you say the call ended abruptly?
He didn't say goodbye, which was very unusual.
Now, around the time of this Wall Street Journal article on November 4th, did a Wall Street Journal reporter contact AMI for comment?
Yes, they did.
And did AMI put out a statement claiming that, quote, AMI had not paid people to kill damaging stories about Mr. Trump?
Yes, that was the statement that we issued.
Was that the truth?
No, it was not.
Did AMI also claim that the payment to McDougal was not for her story, but rather for her columns and her exclusive life rights?
That's correct.
Was that true?
No, it was not.
Who authorized those statements?
I did.
Why did you authorize AMI to put out false statements about the true nature of the deal with Karen McDougal?
I wanted to protect my company. I wanted to protect myself, and I wanted also to protect Donald Trump.
I'm going to show you People's Exhibit 174 again. This can go to everybody.
Whereupon an exhibit is shown on the screens.
Does this exhibit contain text between you and Dylan Howard?
Yes, it does.
I'm specifically going to ask that you zoom in yes. For the record, text 289 through 294. What dates were these texts sent?
They were sent November 5th, 2016.
And who, I'm sorry, you already told us who the texts were with. So that first text, who was it from and who was it to?
From Dylan Howard to me.
And what is the body of the text?
The body of the text is, "No change. She's still underground per Keith."
What is your recollection of why you were having this exchange, if you have one?
The Wall Street Journal article was published on November 4th. It received an enormous amount of press, and I was very concerned that if Karen was still going to comply with the agreement that we had, and I didn't know if she went off the reservation. So I asked Dylan to call Keith Davidson, and he came back with these comments that she's still underground. Karen was living in Arizona that time, so he was saying she wasn't taking any calls.
And how did withdrawn, the next text, who is the next text from?
From Dylan Howard to me.
Okay, what is the body of the next text?
He's saying he's explaining to me the conversation that he had with Keith Davidson, saying that he Just spoke. That she's cool. Moving forward with the deal.
What deal do you understand that to mean?
That was my original question I asked Dylan to determine whether she's still going to comply with the agreement.
The confidentiality agreement?
The confidentiality agreement.
How did you respond to Dylan Howard when he told you that? Excellent news. Did you then send another text a little bit later?
Yes.
What is the text that you sent?
I asked him, did they have any updates?
What were you asking to be updated about?
I wanted to be updated about Karen McDougal, since there was multiple press reports other than the Wall Street Journal.
Just to be clear about that text, when you're asking for any updates, was that what was the date and time of that?
That was November 6th.
What was the time?
This would have been in Eastern Time, New York time, so that would be 9:35.
Do you happen to know when daylight savings time ended in 2016?
That would be sometime in the winter.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is it fair to say that the UTC time is either 4 or 5 hours?
Yeah, it's 4 or 5 hours.
That's correct.
Ahead of the time of New York.
That's correct. When you asked for any updates, how did Dylan Howard respond?
He responded back. Status quo, moving forward, no DV mentions. 1 day of discomfort and back to the campaign issues.
What did you understand that to mean?
That there was no mention on cable news or broadcasts about the Karen McDougal story. And he was saying, 1 day of discomfort. That would be 1 day of a lot of bad press. And that the press was just reporting campaign issues, not anything related to Karen McDougal.
And how did you respond?
Thank you, thanks.
After the Wall Street Journal article, did AMI also amend its agreement with Karen McDougal?
Yes.
In what way?
We received a call from a different attorney representing Karen McDougal, and the attorney stated that Karen was getting a number of calls from the press to do various interviews, and she has been bombarded and would like to speak to the press. So, and the lawyer who was representing her said he wanted the confidentiality agreement amended, so she has the right to speak to the press, without suffering any penalties.
Did you in fact amend the agreement at some point?
Yes, I did.
Prior to doing that, did you speak about the idea of releasing or amending, I guess, the agreement that you had with Ms. McDougal? Did you speak about that with Michael Cohen?
Yes, I did.
And what did he say about that?
He said it was a very bad idea, that the boss would be very angry, that why did you pay her the $150,000? And he highly recommended that I didn't amend the agreement or allow her to speak to the press.
Did you take that advice?
No, I didn't.
I'm now showing you what's in evidence already as People's Exhibit 157. We can show this to everyone. Do you recognize this document?
Whereupon an exhibit is shown on the screens.
Yes, I do.
What is it?
This is the amendment to the licensing agreement of Karen McDougal to allow her to speak to the press.
Why did you want to allow Ms. McDougal to speak to the press at this point?
I felt that the Wall Street Journal article already set the stage and the tone of what the story is. And I around the wanted to try and keep some form of control on story, so it's not going to go any further than where it already was out in the public marketplace. That was 1. 2, press. I wanted to have a representative of the representative, I should say 2 PR representative for Karen, who reported to American media, so we would have some type of contact. And I felt that Karen having somebody to speak to the press in her behalf, with all the calls she was getting, would make her feel more comfortable.
And the press, so did you get a press consultant?
Yes.
For Karen McDougal?
Yes.
And that was a press consultant who reported to you?
Yes.
I want to turn to page 2 of this amendment. Is this the signature page?
Yes, it is.
Who signed on behalf of Karen McDougal?
On the American media side.
On Karen McDougal's side?
Karen McDougal signed it on November 29th, 2016.
And who signed it on behalf of American media? Do you recognize that signature?
Signature? I don't know if that signature it could be 2 people. It's either Dylan Howard or Cam Straker. I believe it's Dylan Howard.
All right, and what was the date that it was signed on behalf of American media?
December 7th, 2016.
So is it fair to say that by the time of this amendment, Mr. Trump had already been elected president?
That's correct.
Now, around the same time, and I'm talking November, December of 2016, did you meet with Michael Cohen in Trump Tower?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell the jury a little bit about that meeting?
I had a meeting with Michael Cohen at his office at Trump Tower. He was still asking me about the boxes of the National Enquirer information that was in that I had brought up from our offices in Florida to New York. And I told him that I had an executive go through all the boxes, and the only information that's there are old articles on Donald Trump, newspaper clippings. There was nothing damaging that he should be concerned about, and I am not going to allow Michael Cohen to go through those boxes, and we were arguing back and forth on that. And I told him I'm not doing it. I said, and then Michael said to me this was around November, December. Michael said to me that he wasn't reimbursed the exact time for the monies that's owed to him on the Stormy Daniels. Payment was number one. Number two, he said that the bonuses for the Trump Organization are normally paid out around Christmas time, and he hasn't received his bonus. He hasn't received his bonus, and he asked me if I would talk to the boss on his behalf, to tell him everything that he did, to try to help him get his bonus.
You did use a couple of pronouns at the end of that sentence.
Sorry.
You said try to help him get his bonus. Try to help who get whose bonus?
He asked me to speak to Donald Trump to help Michael Cohen get his bonus.
I'm sorry to be so formal. You understand why.
That's okay.
I think you said one of the things Michael tells you is he hadn't yet been repaid in connection to the payments to Stormy Daniels?
That's right.
What did you understand that to mean?
That Michael Cohen paid Stormy Daniels out of his own funds, which was the first time I heard of that. I wasn't involved in the transaction, so I didn't know how it was paid.
And what did you understand him to be complaining about?
I understood he was complaining that he has not been repaid.
And withdrawn. I believe you told us earlier that you had been under the impression that this was going to be paid for by either Donald Trump or the Trump Organization. Is that right?
That's correct.
So what happens withdrawn? Did there come a time when Donald Trump himself entered the room?
Yes. While I was having a conversation with Michael Cohen, Donald Trump came into the room, and he and Michael Cohen said to Donald Trump that, "I'm talking to David about all the old Inquirer files. I went through them." I, being Michael Cohen. I went through the files. We have nothing to be concerned about. And then I asked Mr. Trump, "Can I walk back to your office with you? I want to talk to you about a few things." And he said, "Fine. Come with me."
What happened then?
When I go back to Mr. Trump's office, I said to him that Michael Cohen is very concerned about his bonus for this year, and I want you to know that he's very loyal. I want you to know he's been working very hard, from my perspective, and I believe he would throw himself under a bus for you, and he's saying that his bonus is really very important to him on the monies that he's going to receive. So, Mr. Trump told me that one. He says, "I don't know what you're talking about." He said, "Michael Cohen has multiple apartments in my buildings. I think he's got about 12 apartments in my buildings. He owns 50 taxi medallions, which are worth $1 million apiece." He said, "Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it."
Mr. Trump said, "Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it."
Yes, that's correct.
So, directing your attention to January 6th of 2017, did you attend another meeting that day, Trump Tower?
Yes, I did.
How did you come to be there?
I received a call from Rona Graff saying to me that the president-elect would like to see you for a meeting.
And what did you say?
At Trump Tower. And I said yes, and she gave me the date and time.
Did you go?
Yes, I went to Trump Tower.
What happened when you got there?
When I arrived at the building, I never saw any type of security like that in my lifetime, and I couldn't get close to the building. So, as I was walking outside, Jared Kushner, who is Donald Trump's son-in-law, and I that time he was going to be an advisor either to the administration, tapped me on the shoulder, and he said, "I'll get you upstairs," and we walked. We went through the resident area of Trump Tower. We took the elevator to the resident to the 24th floor, if I recall correctly, and then we walked over to me Trump's office.
Just to be clear, this time Mr. Trump was the president-elect?
That's correct. President-elect.
This was early January 2016, 2017?
2017.
So you said you went to Mr. Trump's office?
Yes.
Tell us about it. What happened when you got to Mr. Trump's office?
There's a waiting room. So when I got to the waiting room, Keith Schiller was there. And Keith asked me, he said, "How's our girl?" Which he was referring to Karen McDougal. So I said, "She's cool. She's, very quiet. No issues." And then he was commenting that he, being Keith, Schiller was excited about going to...
Objection, Judge.
Overruled.
You can answer.
He was excited about going to Washington. And then I was waiting in the waiting room. And shortly after, Rona said that, "The president would like to see you now." And I walked into Mr. Trump's office.
What was that like?
On that day when I went there, when I walked into his office, around his desk he had James Comey, Sean Spicer, Reince Priebus, and Michael Pompeo, and they were updating Mr. Trump on the Fort Lauderdale shooting.
Are you referring to a shooting that had taken place in the Fort Lauderdale airport that day?
Yes, in the airport. That's correct.
What were they saying?
They were around Mr. Trump's desk. I just walked in, and they were giving him an update. They were finishing up their meeting, and then Mr. Trump introduced me to each of them, and then he said, "Here is David Pecker. He's the owner, the publisher of the National Enquirer, and he probably knows more than anybody else in this room," as a joke. Unfortunately, they didn't laugh.
Whereupon the jurors laugh.
And then they left before him. They left, and Mr. Trump asked me to sit down to chat.
And can you tell us about that chat, please?
Yes. He asked me how I was doing. I said, I'm doing okay. He asked me how Karen was doing, and he asked, how's Karen doing? How's our girl? How's my girl doing? How's our girl doing? He said. I said, she's writing her articles. She's quiet, easy. Things are going fine. So he said, I want to thank you for handling the McDougal situation. And then he said, he also said, I want to thank you for the doorman story, the doorman situation.
And what did you understand Mr. Trump to be thanking you for regarding the Karen McDougal story and the doorman story?
I felt that he was thanking me for buying them and for not publishing any of the stories and helping the way I did.
And did he say why he was so appreciative?
He said that the stories could be very embarrassing.
What do you understand that to mean?
I felt that it was going to be very embarrassing to him, his family, and the campaign.
Now, did he ever say anything to you that made you think that his concern about these stories getting out was for his family rather than for his campaign?
I thought it was for the campaign.
What makes you say that?
Every time the conversations that I had with Michael Cohen with respect to both of these stories, his family was never mentioned. And the conversations that I had directly with Mr. Trump, his family wasn't mentioned. So I made the assumption it was the concern was the campaign.
And was withdrawn. Did there come a time when you perceived that Donald Trump's concern shifted in some way?
No response.
You don't know what I'm talking about?
I don't know.
Let me show you 3028, pages 6 and 7. Privately, please.
Whereupon an exhibit is shown to the witness on his screen.
I'm going to ask you, was this one of the interviews you did with the FBI?
Yes.
Take a look, page 6, the bottom of page 6. Read it to yourself. Don't read it out loud. Read it to yourself. We'll show you the bottom of page 7, and then I'll ask you that question again.
Whereupon the witness reviews the exhibit on his screen.
Tell me when you're ready for the next page.
Yes, I am.
Ready for the next page. Okay, showing to you page 7.
Nods.
Does that refresh your recollection as to whether you believed that Donald Trump's focus shifted at some point?
Judge, I'm going to object.
Please approach.
See hereupon the following proceedings were held. I sidebar.
I'm just trying to limit the speaking objections.
I understand. That's okay. The objection here, the proper way to refresh the recollection. Does that refresh your recollection? He looks, I it. Does it? Yes, no. What is your recollection? That was not done.
I think it pretty much was done.
Do it the right way.
Whereupon the following proceedings were held in open court.
The objection is noted.
Okay, Mr. Pecker, did you read that document I asked you to look at?
Yes, I did.
Did that refresh your recollection to the question I was asking you?
Yes.
Can you please share with us that recollection?
Prior to the election, if a negative story was coming out with respect to Donald Trump and we spoke about it, he was always concerned about Melania Trump. He was concerned about Ivanka. He was concerned about what the family might hear or say about it, not saying whether it was true or not. After the campaign, and when I was in his office and we were discussing this, he was concerned on the doorman story with respect to if the story came out, which wasn't and I didn't true, about him having an illegitimate child, hear or discuss that he was concerned that WNAT would Melania say, or what would Ivanka say, what his family would say. It was basically, what would be the impact be to the campaign or election?
Was that true, your conversations with Donald Trump about the Karen McDougal story as well?
Yes.
After Mr. Trump announced his candidacy for president, did he ever say anything to you that indicated that he was concerned about what Melania Trump or Ivanka Trump would think about these affairs?
No.
How did you leave when you left Trump Tower that day? How did you leave it with Mr. Trump?
At the end of the meeting, Mr. Trump invited me, he called Rona, and asked her to call me and send me an invitation to the inauguration event. And then I asked him, I said, look, how do we communicate between each other? So he said that he was going to get a cell phone and a cell number that he would give his friends, that we could use that cell phone number, which never transpired. And that's pretty much how we left that.
And you said that he invited you to the inauguration?
Yes.
Did you go?
No, I didn't go.
Why not?
I asked my wife and she didn't want to go. She just didn't want to attend. And I decided not to attend.
Is this a good time to break?
Sure, Judge.
Continuing case on trial. People v. Donald J. Trump. All parties are present.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I signed the order to show cause. I am handing out 2 copies to each party.
Whereupon documents are given to the parties by the court officer.
Thank you, Judge. I am also going to hand counsel a copy of the affirmation and a copy of the thumb drive with the fuller video clips.
Thank you. I also had an opportunity to look, over the lunch break, the case authority, handed up and some of the articles handed up. My decision remains the same.
May I confirm, all of the exhibits that we introduced from 154 to 179 are in evidence, except for 169 and 172A?
You might remember, Judge, that before the break, I said I had one more.
Right, 171A we still have to talk about.
You want to do it now?
Yes, 171A is another thread of text messages. This thread is between Mr. Howard and Gina Rodriguez, who, as you've heard this morning, was one of the sources that Mr. Howard used as an intermediary for at least one of his stories. So our position here is that there are substantive, factual assertions by Rodriguez in this text chain. There's not a foundation that she is participating in a conspiracy. She's just reporting information to Mr. Howard. Howard then, specifically in these messages, because of the substantive, factual assertions being made to him, he's not making statements in furtherance of a conspiracy by speaking to her.
Do you have a copy that I could look at?
I think it was in the binder that I handed up this morning. I can give you another copy.
Yes, I'll take that.
No problem.
Whereupon a document is shown to the court.
Whenever the court is ready, I would like to be heard on that.
Okay.
First of all, in response to counsel's objections, we removed a portion of the exchange that post-dated the conspiracy, and so we're only seeking to admit the texts that go up through October of 2016. These are, first off, admissible as a business record, insofar as it was the regular course of AMI's business to purchase stories such as Ms. Daniels' story, and Howard conducted that business as part of the regular job responsibilities and was under the business duty to do so truthfully. Again, even if the underlying content isn't admissible as a business record, the court has determined Mr. Howard is a co-conspirator, and these are core statements in furtherance of the conspiracy, insofar as they involve discussions with Ms. Rodriguez involving the acquisition of the Stormy Daniels story. I do agree with Mr. Bove. The factual statements contained in Ms. Rodriguez's texts should not be considered for the truth, and her portion of the conversation should only be admitted to contextualize Mr. Howard's conversations with her.
I think we're basically on the same page. Our point here is, admittedly somewhat new on this one, Judge, in exercising your discretion about what's going to come in and how this trial there is a tipping point where there are factual assertions in these documents that are being put in front of the jury, we appreciate the limiting instructions. At some point, cumulatively, it becomes cumulatively prejudicial. It becomes extremely hard during deliberations where the juror sorts through what is the truth, what is not. They can sort through the exhibits. These texts messages, when you look the ass, ons Ms. Rodriguez is making, these are very, very substantive and go directly to what's going on. And we're not going to have an opportunity to cross-examine her. That's why we think for these messages, in light of that, they should not come in. They are, admittedly, her statements, are not in furtherance of the conspiracy, and therefore to offer them not for their truth is unduly prejudicial to us.
If you want me to say anything more?
It's up to you.
We don't think they're too prejudicial in any way, shape, or form. This is core, the conspiracy being enacted in real time in terms of this is the effort to buy up the Stormy Daniels story, discussions about the Stormy Daniels story. It is really a core part of the conspiracy. So I think any possibility of prejudice can be cured, as it has with several other documents, by instructing the jury that any factual assertions in the Rodriguez portions of those texts should not be considered for the truth, but only to contextualize Mr. Howard's responses. If there's one or two lines that are not necessary to contextualize Ms. Rodriguez's Mr. Howard's communications, and defense counsel wants to bring those one or two lines to our attention, we can consider whether it's appropriate to redact them. We are not looking to prove the truth of what Ms. Rodriguez is saying. However, what she's saying is semi-important in terms of what AMI's motivation was in terms of buying up that story and preventing it from being released.
I'm looking at 15 pages of texts.
Yes, it is 15 pages of text. I don't think it has to be resolved today, insofar as I don't think we're going to walk through these texts with Mr. Pecker. So, if Your Honor wants to take a look and see if there's specific offending texts that Your Honor feels are necessary to redact, and or other parties can do that, we can take it from there and have a summary witness look at these.
Yes, I appreciate that. I would like to have some time to look at these more closely.
Thank you. Any chance I can have that binder back and I'll give you that one?
All right, we can get the witness, please.
Witness entering. whereupon the witness, David Pecker, having been previously duly sworn and or affirmed, resumes the witness stand and testifies as follows.
Good afternoon, Mr. Pecker. You're still under oath, sir.
All rise, jury entering, whereupon the jurors and the alternate jurors are present and properly seated. Continuing case on trial, People v. Donald J. Trump. All parties and all jurors are present.
Good afternoon, Mr. Pecker.
Good afternoon.
When we broke before lunch, we just finished talking about a meeting you had in Trump Tower on January 6, 2017. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Directing your attention to July of that same year, 2017, did there come a time when you visited the White House?
Yes, I did.
How did that come about? I received a call from President Trump's office from his assistant, Madeline. I think it was, I can't remember her last name, and she said, "The president is on the phone." Mr. Trump called and invited me to the White House for dinner. Did he say why?
He said it was a thank you dinner, and he invited myself and my wife.
And what did you say?
I said that I'll speak to my wife and I'll get right back to you.
And did you do that?
I did. And my wife didn't want to go to Washington, and I called back Mr. Trump and explained to him, and he said, "Look, business friends, business associates, it's your dinner."
Your dinner meaning?
My thank you dinner.
So who did you bring? Did you go?
Yes. Did you bring? I brought all business associates.
You don't have to tell us everybody you brought, but among the people you brought, did it include Dylan Howard?
Yes.
Did it include David Brodsky?
Yes, it did.
Do you remember who you coordinated the logistics of your visit with?
We coordinate everything through Madeline I, the White House.
So what happened when you went?
When we arrived at the White House, we were all taken to the Oval Office. And in the Oval Office, Jared Kushner was there, Sean Spicer was there, and each of the people that I brought to the White House was able to take a photo with Mr. Trump in the Oval Office.
Did the subject of McDougal come up by all?
At the time to have dinner, Mr. Trump asked me to join him in a walk from the Oval Office to the dining area. We passed the Rose Garden, and as we walked out, President Trump asked me, How is Karen doing?" He said, "How's Karen doing?" So I said, "She's doing well. She's quiet. Everything is going good."
And who do you understand Karen to be a reference to?
Karen was Karen McDougal.
Now, you mentioned that you and Dylan Howard posed for photos in the White House that day?
Yes, we did.
I'm showing you and the jury what's in evidence as People's 179, and I just want to ask you if you recognize this series of documents. You can scroll through a little bit if you want.
Yes.
And are these a series of texts between Dylan Howard and Keith Davidson, produced in response to a subpoena served on AMI?
Yes, it was.
And does the exhibit include separate photos of yourself and Dylan Howard in the White House?
No response.
Do you need to see? I haven't seen these. Let me show you page 4 of this exhibit.
Yes, I see a photo of Dylan Howard.
So the person you recognize the person depicted in that photo?
Yes, that's Dylan Howard.
Okay, do you know where that photo was taken?
It was in the White House. I don't know which room that was.
All right, let me show you page 3 of this exhibit and ask you if you recognize the people depicted in this photo.
Yes, that's myself and President Trump. We were walking to the dinner.
And is this when you had the conversation about Karen?
Yes.
And I want to finally direct you to page 2 of this. And I'm going to ask you, is this a text between Dylan?
Yes, it is.
What is the body of the text?
Dylan telling Keith how the dinner went last night.
What day was that text sent?
July 12th.
So does that mean that the dinner was on July 11th of...
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. You can take that down. Directing your attention to August 11th of 2017, did you meet with Karen McDougal personally?
Yes, I did.
Where was that?
It was a restaurant in New York called Il Postino.
Who else was present this lunch, Il Postino?
Keith Davidson and Dylan Howard, and Karen McDougal.
How did this meeting come about?
Dylan came to my office and said that he spoke to Keith Davidson, and Keith thought that it would be a good idea that if I had a lunch with Karen McDougal, they would like to come to New York for a meeting, see the offices of American media.
What was the purpose of the lunch? Let me ask you this. What was discussed at the lunch?
When I had lunch with Karen, she talked about the articles that she was preparing with the ghostwriters. She was a little bit upset because Dylan Howard had to change some of the ghostwriters because they weren't working well with Karen. And she talked about her idea and concept of going forward and launching some beauty products that we talked about originally, that she brought up in the original agreement. Then she subsequently said that she wasn't pleased because the articles were taking a while. She hasn't been, trained for media training because she wanted to be that anchor on the red carpet for Radar for the Radar digital site. So she was stating what she would like to get done. From my standpoint, the purpose of the meeting was to make sure that we were complying to her agreement and that she was comfortable with what we committed to her on what we were going to provide.
Why did you want her to believe that?
I wanted her to remain within our family. I should say, whereby she was comfortable that we were complying with what we promised her in the original agreement, and that she would not go out and speak to the press. After what happened after the Wall Street Journal article, and all the press that came out of that. So I wanted to see how comfortable she was.
So now I want to direct your attention to January of 2018. You just reminded us about the article that came out about Karen McDougal in the Wall Street Journal on November 4th of 2016. Did another article come out in the Wall Street Journal in January of 2018, in which the press publicly reported that Michael Cohen paid Stormy Daniels not to discuss her sexual relationship with Mr. Trump?
Yes.
Do you remember when that was?
No response.
What date it was?
I thought it was either early January.
All right, let me show you privately. People's Exhibit 181. Do you see it?
Yes, I do.
Is this the article that revealed that Michael Cohen had paid Stormy Daniels to keep quiet about her affair with Donald Trump?
Yes, it is.
I offer it into evidence.
No objection, subject to a limiting instruction.
It's accepted into evidence. Again, subject to the same instructions I've given you before. It's being offered not for the truth of the matter asserted, but just to demonstrate that it was, in fact, printed on that date.
Now we can display it to everybody, please.
Whereupon an exhibit is shown on the screens.
Let me just ask you, Mr. Pecker, what was the date of this article?
January 12th, 2018.
What outfit published it?
This was published by the Wall Street Journal.
Now, once again, did AMI issue a press release withdrawn? Directing your attention now to March of 2018, did you come to learn that Karen McDougal was interviewed by Anderson Cooper?
Yes.
Do you recall when that interview took place?
I thought it was in March of 2018. I remember the middle of March. March 18th?
Somewhere around there?
Somewhere around that area.
Did you watch it when it aired?
Yes, I did.
Did Mr. Trump contact you in connection to Ms. McDougal's appearance on Anderson Cooper?
The following day, I received a call from Mr. Trump.
Can you tell the jury about that call?
Yes. Donald called and he said to me, he said, "Did you see the interview last night with Anderson Cooper and Stormy Daniels?" I said, "Yes." He said,
"Before you go on, right now I'm just asking you about the airing of the Anderson Cooper interview with Karen McDougal. We'll get to the Stormy Daniels interview later."
"Who?"
So my question is, did Mr. Trump call you in connection with Karen McDougal's appearance?
Yes, he did.
Now please tell us what he told you about that.
So Mr. Trump said when he called me that, he said, "Did you see the Anderson Cooper interview with Karen McDougal?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I thought you had, and we had an agreement with Karen McDougal that she can't give any interviews or be on any television shows." So I said, "Yes." I said, "We have an agreement, but I amended it to allow her to speak to the press." So Mr. Trump got very aggravated when he heard that I amended it, and he couldn't understand why. I said, "Karen has a 2-year agreement. She was flooded with requests from the press for interviews, and I amended her agreement at that time." He said, "Well, then you paid her." I said, "Yes, I paid her, and I amended the agreement." So he was very upset. He couldn't understand why I did it, and that was basically the conversation.
When you said he was very upset, he couldn't believe that you did it. Who is the he you're referring to?
He, referring to Donald Trump.
Did there come a time after that when you spoke with Mr. Trump and other members of his White House staff?
Yes.
When in relation to the call that you had with Mr. Trump alone?
It was right after the call that I had with Mr. Trump.
And who else was part of that call besides yourself and Mr. Trump?
Hope Hicks and Sanders.
Okay, can you tell the jury about that call a bit?
Well, on that call, what I was planning to do, and I mentioned it on the previous call to Mr. Trump, that I was going to extend Karen McDougal's contract. It was for 6 months. The contract was up. And I felt that from that last lunch that I had with her, that we had fulfilled some of the obligations that she was looking for, specifically her beauty products and media training. So, I was going to send a contract. He thought that was on our original conversation. He thought that that was also a bad idea. So, when I received the second call, when I got the call back, and Hope Hicks and Huckabee Sanders Huckabee, when she was on the call, I explained to the two of them, that why I was going to extend her agreement, and both of them said that they thought that it was a good idea.
What was the reason that you gave for why you wanted to extend Karen McDougal's contract?
I wanted to extend her contract so she would not go out and give any further interviews, or talk to the press, or say negative comments about American media, or about Mr. Trump.
Now, you said when you had your individual conversation with Mr. Trump, he was skeptical of that?
Yes.
How about when you explained the reason that you wanted to extend her contract to Mr. Trump, Ms. Hicks, and Ms. Sanders? How did Mr. Trump react to the new plan, or how did he react to that plan during that second conversation?
He said, "It's your business. You do whatever you plan on doing."
Directing your attention to March of 2018, did there come a time when Ms. McDougal filed a lawsuit against AMI?
Yes, she did.
Briefly, what was the nature of that lawsuit?
The lawsuit was basically, for one reason. She, being Karen McDougal, wanted to get back her lifetime rights.
So she wanted out of the non-disclosure agreement?
That's correct.
How was that lawsuit ultimately resolved?
We settled, and I returned her lifetime rights back to Karen.
Did you ever communicate with Michael Cohen about the lawsuit while it was pending?
Yes, I did.
And did you tell him what you were planning to do?
I did, and he thought that was a very bad idea. He couldn't understand why I would agree to anything like that, and I told him that she's very upset. I'm not going to continue on with the potential litigation, and I'm just going to give her back her rights.
Is that what you did?
Yes.
Now, a few days after Ms. McDougal's appearance on Anderson Cooper, did you also come to learn that Stormy Daniels was interviewed by Anderson Cooper?
Yes.
And did you watch that broadcast when it aired?
I did.
Did Mr. Trump contact you in connection with Ms. Daniels' appearance on Anderson Cooper?
Yes, he did.
Can you describe for the jury how that conversation?
When Mr. Trump called me, he said to me the same. He asked me if I saw the Stormy Daniels interview with Anderson Cooper. I said, yes, I did. He said that we have an agreement with Stormy Daniels that she cannot mention my name or do anything like this. And each time she breaches the agreement, it's $1 million penalty. And based on the interview with Anderson Cooper, Stormy Daniels owes Donald Trump $24 million.
That's what Donald Trump told you?
That's what he told me.
Directing your attention to early 2018, do you remember receiving a letter from the Federal Election Commission around that time?
Yes, I do.
Did you speak with Michael Cohen after receiving the...
Yes.
Can you describe that conversation for us?
When I received the letter from the Federal Election Commission, the FEC, I called up Michael Cohen immediately. And he and I asked him, I said, Michael, I just received this letter. So Michael Cohen said, so did I. I said, what are you going to do about that? He said, I'm going to respond and I'm going to send them a letter. I said, I'm very worried. And Michael Cohen says to me, why are you worried? I said, what do you mean? He says, Jeff Sessions is the Attorney General, and Donald Trump has him in his pocket. I said, I'm very worried.
Directing your attention to September 21st, 2018, were you aware that AMI entered into a non-prosecution agreement and a statement of facts with the Southern District of New York?
Yes.
And is the Southern District of New York, is it your understanding that those are federal prosecutors?
Yes, I understand that.
Were you still CEO of AMI the time that agreement was executed?
Yes, I was.
What is your understanding of that non-prosecution agreement?
We admitted to a campaign violation.
And?
Objection. Move to strike.
Overruled.
Please approach. Whereupon the following proceedings were held, I sidebar.
What's the objection?
I may have misheard. I thought I may have heard he admitted to an election violation.
Can you read that back?
Whereupon the requested portion was read back by the court reporter.
I think that's a mischaracterization of the agreement. We understand the agreement is coming in with a limited instruction. We don't think there should be testimony about what he did there.
The agreement is coming in?
Yes, we're not going to object. It's coming in subject to the limiting instructions.
When would you like the limiting instructions?
When it's admitted, please.
I actually do think that's a fair characterization of it. In any event, to the extent that the operation of the witness's mind differs from the agreement will be in, and everything will be cleared up. That's how I read the agreement, is that they admitted to a campaign finance violation.
Whereupon the following proceedings were held in open court.
The objection is overruled.
In addition to that, did this agreement impose a requirement on AMI and its representatives to cooperate and give truthful testimony and information?
Yes.
And as a result of that, would AMI not be criminally prosecuted for campaign finance violations?
That is correct.
As part of that agreement, did AMI make several admissions, including in statements of facts?
Yes, they did.
As CEO at the time, did you review that statement of facts before anyone from AMI signed the non-prosecution agreement?
Yes, I did.
I would like to show the witness privately what's been marked for identification as People's Exhibit 182. Do you have that in front of you?
Yes, I do.
I'm going to ask you, do you recognize that exhibit?
Yes.
Is that an exact copy of the non-prosecution agreement that AMI entered into with the Southern District of New York, along with the statement of admitted facts that's attached to the agreement?
Yes, it is.
I offer it into evidence.
No objection.
Would you like the instruction?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
Jurors, we have just heard testimony that while David Pecker was an executive at AMI, AMI entered into a non-prosecution agreement with federal prosecutors, as well as a conciliation agreement with the Federal Election Commission. That evidence was permitted to assist you, the jury, in assessing David Pecker's credibility and to help provide context for some of those surrounding events. You may consider that testimony for those purposes only. Neither the non-prosecution agreement nor the conciliation agreement is evidence of the defendant's guilt, and you may not consider them in determining whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty of the charged crimes.
Thank you, Judge.
Whereupon the exhibit is received in evidence.
Now we can display that to everyone, please. I'm going to ask you, Mr. Pecker, what is the date of this non-prosecution agreement?
September 20th, 2018.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to walk us through portions of it. I apologize in advance. Can we please blow up page 1, paragraph 1? Can you read that, or would you rather have me read it and tell me if I get it right? That's up to you.
You want me to read the entire paragraph?
Whichever you prefer.
Sure. Based on the cooperation and implementation of remedial measures described below, and strictly subject to the terms, conditions, and understandings set forth herein, the Office of the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York will not criminally prosecute American media for any crimes, except for criminal tax violations, if any, as to which this office cannot and does not make any agreement, related to its participation, between in or about August 2015, up to and including in or about October 2016, in making a contribution and expenditure, aggregating $25,000 and more during the 2016 calendar year, to the campaign of a candidate for President of the United States. This conduct is described more fully in the statement of facts, which is,
You may have missed a line. After President of the United States, comma.
O. President of the United States, comma, to the AMI, has disclosed such participation to this office as of the date of this agreement. Period. This conduct is described more fully in the statement of facts, which is attached hereto as Exhibit A and incorporated by reference herein. AMI accepts and acknowledges as true the facts set forth in the statement of facts. Counsel for AMI hereby represents and warrants that the Board of Directors has authorized counsel to enter into this agreement.
I'm sorry to ask you such a silly question, but who did you understand the candidate for President of the United States in this paragraph to be referring to?
Donald Trump.
Okay. I'm now going to skip to the statement of admitted facts, which is on page 4. It starts on page 4, and I'm going to ask you to walk us through some of these paragraphs, please. Most of these paragraphs, actually. Starting with paragraph 2. Go ahead.
To read the...
Just read it.
Just read it. Set forth in more detail below. On or about August 10th, 2016, AMI made a payment in the amount of $150,000 in cooperation, consultation, and concert with, and the request and suggestion of one or more members or agents of a candidate's 2016 presidential campaign to ensure that a woman did not publicize damaging allegations about that candidate before the 2016 presidential election, and thereby influence that election.
And once again, is that candidate Donald Trump?
Yes.
Okay, paragraph 3, please.
In or about August 2015, David Pecker, the chairman and chief executive officer of AMI, met with Michael Cohen, an attorney for a presidential candidate, and at least one other member of the campaign. At the meeting, Pecker offered to help deal with negative stories about that presidential candidate's relationships with women by, among other things, assisting the campaign by identifying such stories so they could be purchased and their publication avoided. Pecker agreed to keep Cohen apprised of any such negative stories.
Paragraph 4. I'm sorry. Before you read paragraph 4, did you understand paragraph 3 to be a reference to that August 2015 meeting that you described several times at Trump Tower involving yourself, Mr. Cohen, and Mr. Trump?
That's correct.
Okay, I'm sorry. Paragraph 4.
In or about June 2016, an attorney representing a model and actress attempting to sell her story of her alleged extramarital affair with the aforementioned presidential candidate contacted an editor of the National Enquirer. Pecker and the editor called Cohen and informed him of the story. At Cohen's urging and subject to Cohen's promise that AMI would be reimbursed, the editor began negotiating for the purchase of the story. On June 20th, 2016, the editor interviewed the model about her story. Following the interview, AMI communicated to Cohen that it would acquire the story to prevent its publication.
And who did you understand that model, when that paragraph refers to a model, who did you understand that to be a reference to?
Karen McDougal.
Thank you. Paragraph 5, please.
On or about August 5, 2016, AMI entered into an agreement with the model to acquire her limited life rights to the story of her relationship with any then-married man in exchange for $150,000. It was also agreed that AMI would feature her on 2 magazine covers and could publish over 100 magazine articles authorized by her. AMI agreed to pay the model $150,000, substantially more money than AMI otherwise would have paid to acquire the story, because of Cohen's assurances to Pecker that AMI would ultimately be reimbursed for the payment. Despite the cover and article features to the agreement, AMI's principal purpose in entering into the agreement was to suppress the model's story so as to prevent it from influencing the election. At no time during the negotiation for or acquisition of the model's story did AMI intend to publish the story or disseminate information about it publicly. On or about August 10, 2016, AMI sent $150,000 to an attorney representing the model.
Okay, paragraph 6, please, displayed.
Between in or about late August 2016 and September 2016, Cohen called Pecker and stated that he wanted to be assigned to the limited life rights portion of AMI's agreement with the model, which included the requirement that the model not otherwise disclose her story. Pecker agreed to assign the rights to Cohen for $125,000. Pecker instructed a consultant who works for AMI to complete the assignment through a company unaffiliated with AMI. On September 30, 2016, Pecker signed...
Let me just stop you for 1 second. That consultant, who is that?
That is Daniel Rothstein.
Okay, keep going.
On September 30, 2016, Pecker signed an assignment agreement, which contemplated the transfer of the limited life rights portion of AMI's agreement to an entity that had been set up by Cohen for $125,000. The consultant delivered the signed assignment agreement to Cohen, along with an invoice from a shell corporation incorporated by the consultant for the payment of $125,000, which falsely stated the payment was for an agreed-upon flat fee for advisory services. However, in or about early October 2016, after the assignment agreement was signed, but before Cohen had paid the $125,000, Pecker contacted Cohen and told him that the deal was off and that Cohen should tear up the assignment agreement.
And paragraph 7.
Following the 2016 presidential election, AMI published articles written by the model in OK Magazine and Star Magazine, featured on the cover of Muscle and Fitness, Hers, and published articles in Radar Online featuring the model. The publication of these articles was intended, at least in part, to keep the model from commenting publicly about her story and her agreement with AMI.
Paragraph 8, please.
At all relevant times, AMI knew that corporations such as AMI are subject to federal campaign finance laws, and that expenditures by corporations made for purposes of influencing an election and in coordination with, or either request of a candidate or campaign, are unlawful. At no time did AMI report to the Federal Election Commission that it had made the $150,000 payment to the model.
And lastly, paragraph 9, please.
AMI has cooperated with the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York and the Federal Bureau of Investigation during its investigation, and provided substantial and important assistance to the investigating agents and prosecutors during the course of the grand jury investigation in the Southern District of New York. Among other things, AMI has made various personnel from AMI available for numerous interviews, engaged outside counsel to ensure the integrity of its compliance with and responses to subpoenas, and responded to numerous requests from prosecutors for various specific items of information. AMI has also agreed in connection with the non-prosecution agreement to implement specific improvements to its internal compliance to prevent future violations of the federal campaign finance laws.
Thank you. Now, you can take that down, thank you. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, I jumped the gun. Yes, just going to ask you. If we can go back to page 3. Can you tell us who signed the non-prosecution agreement that had the statement of admitted facts appended to it? Who signed the non-prosecution agreement on behalf of AMI?
Eric Klee, who was the general counsel of American Media.
At the time?
At the time.
And what was the date that the non-prosecution agreement was signed?
September 21st, 2018.
Was it also signed by AMI's attorneys?
Yes, outside attorneys.
Yes, outside attorneys. Thank you for correcting me.
Okay, thank you.
Now we can take it down, sorry. Did there also come a time when you agreed to cooperate with an investigation being conducted by the New York County District Attorney's Office?
Yes.
As part of that agreement, did you, your lawyer, AMI's lawyer, and a representative from the District Attorney's Office sign a cooperation letter?
Yes.
I'm now showing you privately what has been marked for identification as People's Exhibit 183, displayed only for the witness. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And is that an exact copy of the agreement you entered into with the New York County District Attorney's Office prior to assisting with their investigation?
Yes, it is.
I offer it into evidence.
No objection.
I accept it into evidence.
Thank you, Your Honor. We can now display it to everybody. And I'm just going to ask you, what was the date of this agreement?
October 25th, 2019.
Do you know what? Rather let me just ask you about some portions of the agreement rather than have you read the whole thing. Can we look the bottom of page 1 and the top of page 2, maybe? Perfect, thank you. Can you read that portion of the agreement?
Yes. David Pecker has agreed to speak with Danny on October 25th, 2019, regarding his knowledge of 1. Meetings with Donald J. Trump, Michael Cohen, and other employees of the Trump Organization concerning Donald J. Trump. 2. Transactions between American Media and Karen McDougal. 3. Transactions between American Media and Michael Cohen. 4. Transactions between Michael Cohen and Stephanie Clifford. And 5. Any information relevant to the background and context of the above subjects.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to skip to the bottom of page 2 and the top of page 3. Thank you. Can you read that part, please?
Examples of materially false or incompetent information or testimony include, but are not limited to the following.
Can I just stop you for a second before you answer that? Was it your understanding that you were obligated to tell the truth, or you could face perjury charges?
Yes, I do.
And does this portion that you are about to read give you examples of what would be considered not being truthful?
Yes.
I'm sorry, now you can go back and read them.
1. Withholding the name of a person involved in criminal activity. 2. Identifying as a participant a person who is not involved in criminal activity. 3. Transposing the roles of participants in criminal activity. 4. Knowingly giving incorrect or misleading information about his participation or the participation of others in criminal activity. 5. Misrepresenting the source of his knowledge.
And, Mr. Pecker, was it your understanding that if you did any of these 5 things, you would be breaching your agreement with the New York County District Attorney's Office?
Yes, I understand that.
And as part of your agreement, were you also required to attend meetings as requested?
Yes.
And was AMI obligated to furnish non-privileged documents and records?
Yes, they were.
And do you remember as you sit here today what the obligations of the New York County District Attorney's Office were in connection with this agreement?
I'm not.
Well, let me ask you.
Yeah.
You just told us what you have to do.
Yes.
Okay, what did we have to do? What did the District Attorney's Office have to do?
Well, the District Attorney's Office had to do the entire investigation and interview me as well as others, I'm assuming.
And maybe you could read these couple of paragraphs from page 2 just to be perfectly clear for the jury.
Okay. DANY agrees to recognize and treat David Pecker and the American media as immunized on the subjects of David Pecker's statements made to the office during the above-referenced October 25, 2019 meeting and any subsequent meeting as to which the parties agree in writing, email sufficing, that the terms of this agreement apply. David Pecker has also agreed that, if asked, he will testify in the grand jury regarding his knowledge of the above subjects. If David Pecker testifies in the grand jury concerning the above subjects, Danny will not request that he waive immunity pursuant to Section 190.45 of the Criminal Procedure Law, and he will thus be immunized from prosecution on the subjects of his testimony.
Now, did you understand withdrawn? You testified, I think on Monday, that you are represented by counsel in connection with this case?
Yes.
Did you understand that any witness who testifies in the grand jury is given automatic immunity unless they waive immunity?
Yes.
Did you understand this paragraph to mean that DANY or the District Attorney of New York would not require you to waive and would not require you to waive immunity when you testified before the grand jury?
Yes, I understand that.
And did you in fact testify before the grand jury?
I did.
And were you given immunity as a result of that testimony?
Yes.
And directing your attention to the paragraph above that, did you understand that paragraph to mean that even though you hadn't yet testified, what you were saying would be treated, you would basically be getting immunity for what you were saying in terms of the pre-grand jury interviews?
Yes, I understood that.
Did you sign similar letters in connection with subsequent meetings with members of the DA's office?
I did.
Directing your attention now to May. We can take that down, thank you. Directing your attention to May of 2021, did AMI enter in a conciliation agreement with the Federal Election Commission?
Yes, they did.
And did someone sign that agreement on behalf of AMI?
Yes.
Do you remember who?
Jeff Pasco, who is the current general counsel.
And as part of that agreement, did AMI agree, Quote, not to the contest that AMI's payment to Karen McDougal to purchase a limited life story, right? Combined with its decision not to publish the story in consultation with an agent of Donald J. Trump, and for the purpose of influencing the election, constituted a prohibited corporate in-kind contribution in violation of 552 U.S.C. Section 30118A.
Yes,
Did you read that conciliation agreement I, the time?
I did.
And what did you understand 52 U.S.C. Section 30118A to prohibit?
Pause.
Do you want me to re-ask that question again?
Yes, please.
I think that you just testified that you let me ask you the question. What did you understand 52 U.S.C. Section 30118A to prohibit?
It's my understanding that I left the company in August of 20, so this happened post my leaving. And the board of directors of the company agreed to this agreement. And it was my understanding that they paid a fine. I think it was $180,000. And that was my understanding of what I remember.
So my question to you is, did you have an understanding the time that AMI was entering into this conciliation agreement?
Yes, I did.
And did you understand what AMI was agreeing not to? What law AMI was agreeing not to contest having violated?
Oh, it agreed that they violated the campaign violation.
9 and withdrawn. Directing your attention to April of 2018. Did you come to learn that the FBI had conducted search warrants the home and office of Michael Cohen?
Yes.
How did you learn that?
The FBI came to my home on that same day and had a search warrant for my phone. And I subsequently received a call from Dylan Howard that he had his phone also taken by search warrant from the FBI. And he mentioned to me that he also heard that Michael Cohen had the same, and had his office or apartment that time, if I recollect, received a search warrant and took his office equipment and telephone.
Just one moment, please. The phone that the FBI seized on that day, your phone, is that the phone that you had been using to communicate via text with Dylan Howard and Michael Cohen and other people relevant to this case?
Yes.
When was the last time that you saw or spoke to the defendant, roughly?
The last time we spoke was, I think, January or February of 2019.
And has he tried to reach out to you since then?
Not directly. I have friends who belong to Mar-a-Lago, and they run into Mr. Trump and he sends his regards.
Did you ever respond?
No, I did not.
Why not?
I felt that with the investigation that was going on at the same time, I thought that it would be inappropriate to respond or have any conversations at all with Mr. Trump.
Mr. Pecker, as you sit here today, do you have any bad feelings or ill will towards the defendant?
Not I all. To the contrary. As I talked about, I think it was on Monday, I felt that Donald Trump was my mentor. He helped me throughout my career. And if I could just give one additional example. In 2001, after the 9/11 attack, my offices in Boca Raton, the American Media Building, I had just renovated it. It took about a year to renovate it, and I just consolidated all of the tabloids in this building. And in the first week or the second week of October of 2001, we received multiple anthrax letters in white envelopes to the various magazines. One of the editors opened up the envelope, inhaled weaponized anthrax, and ended up dying not too long after that. And the same time, within a matter of hours or within a day, the FBI took quarantine of the building because the building was filled with anthrax. That time, all of the content that the tabloids had, photos, stories, was all quarantined, and we had to vacate the building, as I said. And I basically was in a very, very difficult place from a business standpoint, a personal standpoint. And the first person who called me asked if I needed help was Donald Trump, and he was very helpful. He recommended an attorney. He helped introduce me to that time Sandy Weil was the chairman of the Travelers Insurance Company, who had the insurance on the building, and helped tremendously in continuing on with my business, so I have no ill will at all. And I still consider him even though we haven't spoken, I still consider him a friend.
I didn't hear that last part.
I said, even though we haven't spoken and I haven't seen him, I still consider him a friend.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pecker. No further questions.